What's up, Sifters? It's Game Face episode 46 on Sifted Games, back on our regular Wednesday schedule after last week. So, Matt, somebody on Twitter accused me last week of, well, it didn't really accuse, just suggested that perhaps we had pushed the show back a day because the Penguins were playing on Wednesday night.
No, we pushed the show back because I had to go to a book reading of at a bookstore of one of my friends. It was a big night for him, and I wanted to support him, so we did it Thursday instead because that was Wednesday.
Yeah.
So it's my fault. It's not the Penguins.
As much as I love the Penguins, I would not push a show to watch the Penguins play hockey. So nice try there, but
he'd just have it on the tablet.
Yeah. So one thing I would say is we have a day less this week to get topics for the show. It's been a slow week in video games this week.
Yeah, it's definitely holding its breath before the release. I guess.
Yeah. I'm also wondering if it's going to stay. Well, first of all, there just weren't a lot of big releases this week. But I'm also wondering too if we're going to start seeing the lull, the calm before the storm here.
Yeah, we're hitting the pre-E3 period where we're going to be talking about two things: how there's nothing to talk about, and is this leak real or not?
Yeah, you're right.
That's going to be the next 3 weeks.
We've been talking about leaks now for 2 months, man. They're coming out, but there were some new games announced this week, and every time I see something like that now, I'm like, why would they announce that now instead of waiting for E3? I'm glad they do because it gives us something to talk about. But
I always assume it's either you think that particular product is going to be buried in the E3,
which
sound and fury, or you have a deeper look to show off for it at E3.
Yeah.
You don't want to have to explain what it is. You want to be able to show people why it is. I guess at the time, a more in-depth, playthrough, or you're going to be going around all the video casts with a 15-minute demo or something like that, which we started. By the way, I'm just saying, G4 started that live, we're going to show you a demo of the thing that's on the floor.
Oh, gee,
and you guys did it too.
Look, G4 created E3 coverage, modern E3 coverage. When we went on and did it with Spike, all we were doing was replicating what we had already learned.
Well, because you were there when we did our first live thing, 2005.
Yeah.
We all basically forged that in the lobby of the convention center there when we weren't allowed to be on the floor.
And Jeff Keighley had his
Jeff Keighley was there that year, was involved. Yeah, so, he helped with all that. We was many a planning meeting in that stupid conference room with Jeff and all those guys. Yeah.
The problem with game journalism in general is that you don't have a lot of flexibility in how you do things because everything is kind of predetermined and pre-established. So, for instance, at E3, when we kind of established how do you do live broadcast E3, the publishers all adapt to that, and they start creating their media plans around it, and they're like, okay, I have this developer for 3 hours on this day, and it takes approximately, from the time we get to a stage, do the demo, wrap and get out, it takes 45 minutes. And then they work out...
Which you had to train them at because they're like, why can't we just show up for 15 minutes?
Right.
Because you have to show up, and we have to get the thing, we have to go through it, and we have to set it up.
We have to set up the game and make
you
sure
never
it
know
works.
What's going to go wrong. There was a whole
make sure
period...
our debug is flashed to the right version.
There was a whole period at one point we were doing a live demo of Resident Evil 5, and it wouldn't work. It wouldn't work. 20 minutes of trying different debugs, didn't work. And finally someone realized it was a PlayStation 3 disc.
But look.
But that's what happened. It's live TV. It's all happening as this is happening.
Everybody is rushed, and it's really crazy, and really simple things can throw a chink into the whole thing.
The most common thing to say after a demo happens is we all look at each other behind the scenes, we all go, do you think the viewers knew?
Yeah.
that it was totally fucking wrong? That we screwed everything up except what was on camera?
Yeah.
It's
and they don't
crazy.
usually notice.
No, usually you don't unless you've been there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's crazy. And now everybody does it. And on one hand, I'm like, we started that. On the other hand, I'm sort of like, man, everybody took this really hard job on themselves, and they all go through that now. And that's not an easy thing to pull off. And a whole lot of outlets pull it off. A whole lot of individual blogs pull it off.
But I think that's because we did it for so long that the PR people know
understand
how to deal with it. And they build it into their plans during E3, and they schedule it with their developers. They know that they're going to be doing it. It's just, it's turned into a machine now, whereas before we were the anomaly. They'd be like, what do you mean we can't come on your show unless we play the game live? That was a huge thing. They thought they could just come on and talk about their game for a little bit and then walk off. We're like, no, like we
Visual
have
medium.
Well, there's competition for this as
Yeah,
well. It's like if we
true.
have this other developer who's willing to come on and demo the game live for us, we're going to give them precedent over you. Now, look, there's exceptions, of course.
Right.
You know, Naughty Dog shows up and they're like, we don't have a build, but we want to talk about Uncharted 8 or whatever. Like, you're going to
sure.
get them on there, but
We don't have anything to show, but if you'd like the Hauser brothers to discuss GTA
Right.
6, like, yeah, they're going to get on
you're
the
going to
show.
let them on. Yeah, there's definitely a pecking order involved. But it has been interesting to watch, not even just E3 coverage, but just covering video games with video, how that has evolved over time. And, you know, not to toot our own horn or anything, but we created a lot of that at Tech
Yeah.
TV, G4, and it's great to see it kind of trickling down now. So anyway, off on a tangent as we often do on Game Face.
Our old victories. One day we'll tell the story of how we spent years arguing that we should broadcast the press conferences and no one believed us.
Yeah, exactly.
No one wants to see that. It's boring.
Yeah. Funny how that works. Anyway, I think it's time to get on with the show. We have managed to cobble together pretty good topics for today's show.
Yeah, I mean, there were a few like pretty hot things that happened. It's just 6 of them was tough.
Yeah. I don't know if we'll hit the 3-hour mark in this show, but I think we'll have a pretty good episode for you guys. So let's get to the Big 6. So you're all looking at that topic list right now.
Yeah.
And I bet you're not at all surprised to see what the first topic is. So Matt, after 3-4 weeks of rumors, speculation, different leaks, I think we finally have it on good word that the PlayStation 4K 4.5 Neo is officially coming. News officially broken by Giant Bomb, which is rare for a Giant
With
Bomb.
like full specs and everything.
Well,
like,
yeah, apparently they got a hold of documentation for the whole thing, which is...
Yeah, not Giant Bomb's usual purview, but they knocked this one out of the park.
And I'll tell you, like, as soon as I saw the story, the first thing I thought was Jeff Gerstmann vetted this. And so I knew right away that it was good, or at least as good as something like that could be. Because I know for a fact that Jeff would not have run this story unless he put his editor through the ringer and knew, at least in his heart, 100% that it was legit, which is why I trust that ultimately this is good information. Austin Walker, is that the guy who broke it? Great job, Austin. Great work. This is the exact type of stuff I was talking about that I'd like to see more of in games journalism, people actually breaking stories and digging for news. So let's talk about it.
Like in my head, I've got like a picture of Austin Walker in like the press hat and everything, like beating Patrick Klepek to the phone booth, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, you didn't explain the monitor.
Oh, yeah, I did not explain this, by the way. So the monitor behind me, and speaking of tangents, so the monitor that you see behind me, today we're getting ready for the show, and the computer just decided to update to Windows 10. Didn't ask me if I wanted to update it.
I was watching it.
There
Like
was no prompt, no anything.
He literally clicked the little button on the back end that puts the "Hey, we're streaming live" thing up on Sifted.net, and all of a sudden it just went to the blue screen and said configuring to update to Windows 10. And
Yeah.
we're like,
Thanks, Microsoft.
wow.
So yeah, at some point I may actually sneak away from the desk while talking to set up the visuals on the PC, or maybe you guys can just tell us in the chat.
Yeah, let us know if it finishes at some point, because we can't really see it.
Yeah, whenever it finishes up, just like put something in the chat to let me know.
But that happened like 6 minutes before we went live, so we're like, well,
there's nothing we can do.
that's what's in the background today.
Yeah, so anyway, just a little side note there. So let's talk about the PlayStation Neo. Is it PlayStation Neo or PlayStation 4 Neo?
I would guess it's PlayStation 4 Neo.
I would hope that they, but I've seen on the press all day today people just calling it PlayStation Neo.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's a code name. Really. It's just like Morpheus. You know,
Right.
someone's a Matrix fan.
Apparently,
Waiting
yeah.
to see what they called Trinity.
Yeah.
Somebody on the
PlayStation-
Sifted comments were saying it would be their new TV, the Trinitytron. I'm like, that's good. I like that. I saw someone else suggest that they'd call the new handheld Trinity, which is bad because Trinity dies.
Right. That's probably what they call the Vita.
Oh.
Maybe that was its code name.
Just rebar right through that screen.
They knew. Yeah, they knew it right away. Yeah.
Yeah, but we kid Sony.
We kid.
I mean, it looks, kind of. It's not a huge leap. It's a good leap, but it's a little. Well, except, I mean, the RAM or the GPU gets a little more oomph, I think. But in general, it looks a little more like overclocking than a new hardware set.
Well, Digital Foundry did an analysis of it, and basically what they said was it's going to be from like going to like medium settings to high settings on a PC, that kind of a jump.
Which is good.
Yeah, that's like noticeable.
I'm wondering, like, I haven't really taken the temperature of kind of the general forum reaction or stuff like this. Like, is everyone excited to give Sony another $500 for another PlayStation? That they already bought a PlayStation? If someone's been waiting on a PlayStation, is this probably more expensive version going to be enticing to them? And like, I'm wondering how, to me, I'm looking at this, I'm just like, well, if you're not in love with Sony exclusives, this pretty much, to me, would push me to PC. Because like, if you're going to make me buy a new console every 3 years, then why don't I just buy a new graphics card every 3 years?
Well, I can understand that because the parity between consoles and PC, that gap is closing every day. Like literally, you really are buying consoles now just for those exclusive games. Mm-hmm. But Sony has some pretty awesome exclusive games coming.
They do.
I think what Sony is going to see is as this news permeates the mainstream, because right now it's really just otaku hardcores that know about it. After E3, when it's announced officially and it starts making its way out into the masses, I think you're going to see a huge fall off of PlayStation 4 hardware being sold.
Sure.
Because who would want to... I mean, a lot of it will depend on pricing. Like, if they drop the price of the original PlayStation 4 down to, like, $200, $250, and then the new PlayStation 4, the Neo, is at that $400 price point, then maybe not.
I mean, that would be wise, I would think, but like, the PlayStation 4 is still $350.
Yeah.
It does come with pack-ins for that, but like...
Yeah, so I guess, look, best case scenario for that is probably $299, and then the Neo, $399.
More, yeah. If they can get it in under that, I guess you're probably using the Neo more as like kind of a way to get your VR thing off the ground, but that's the thing is like...
They're saying that's not the case, by the way.
They can say whatever they want,
right?
But like, we're not dumb. So I mean, the 4K thing is interesting, but there's not enough 4K TV owners to really justify releasing an entirely new set of hardware for that.
I don't know anyone with a 4K TV. A couple people on Sifted have said they have them, but
I know I have a 4K monitor. I don't have a 4K TV.
Yeah.
Like I won't get rid of that TV.
No, I take that back. I do have a cousin who has one, but it's like a small one.
Well, then like you never know what because like 4K is a very wide band in some cases. Like I know like there was like Best Buy I think was selling on Black Friday last year, they were selling like a 4K TV for like $300, but if you look at it, it was like the lowest possible resolution that could qualify for 4K.
And it's also made by some like off-brand probably.
Right.
And
so like, if you're really talking about someone who has like a full-blown like, top quality 4K TV that this system would take advantage of, I think you're talking about a very, a slice of people like us.
Yeah.
Hardcore people who would subscribe to Sifted, hardcore people who care about the experience and care about getting the top quality, experience out of their gaming.
I'm guessing,
or their movie watching.
Yeah, I'm guessing more than most other leagues, Sony is probably pretty devastated that this got out because it could have a huge effect on their bottom line. Like people now know that there's this better model coming for sure. Mm-hmm. What's the incentive to buy a PlayStation 4 right now?
Nothing.
I mean, think about people who just bought one.
I mean, it would be
in the last month or two.
Right. Well, it would be different if you say the PlayStation 4 was more like 200 or like 175 or something, and it was more of like a quick, not a minor purchase, but a purchase that you could kind of get away with. Is like, oh, I think I'll just pick up a PS4. But like 350 is a major buy,
it is,
and it's not going to be that much different from at this point. I would guess like $50 more will get you a Neo by the end of the year. So, I would feel pretty ripped off.
I mean, look, they're going to have to get rid of that old inventory somehow.
Yeah.
So they're going to have to discount the old PlayStation 4 in some way, shape, or form because otherwise they're going to have warehouses full of the old units.
Yeah. And the other thing I wonder is, one of the advantages of the PSVR was cost, right? But let's say you have a PS4, which would be one of the main reasons you'd also buy a PSVR, and now you want a PS Neo to run the VR on a level that might compete with you've almost spent that Oculus standard $1,500 on your PlayStation setup now.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I'm not saying you have to buy the Neo to have a decent VR experience. I don't think that's necessarily the case, but it sure looks tempting if you're kind of riding that cutting edge and you want, that's certainly why I bought a couple of graphics cards in my time. It's well, I like this game's great, but it could look a little better if I just put that much money. And it's like that temptation is right there. And the one thing I think is kind of not disheartening, but sort of like very obviously a shift if this becomes something that sells well. Like, console gaming used to be kind of free of that problem. You used to be able to buy the system and you were good for the gen. Like, that was your baseline. That was, this is like, my instinct is to look at this and be like, oh, Sega CD, here we go. But what if this isn't the Sega CD? What if it works this time?
I think people, because of mobile phones, I think people are a lot more open-minded on upgrading their technology. Obviously, the difference here is you're not getting a subsidy for the piece of hardware.
The contract isn't getting you the phone for free in this case.
Well, truth be told, though, even in those deals, like, you actually end up paying like more for the phone over the long haul than if you just.
But that's not how we perceive it as a consumer.
Yeah.
Like, it's much easier to spread that across 2 years as opposed to demand it up front for the PlayStation Neo. And then I've also seen people that seem to think there's going to be some sort of like trade-in policy for Sony, where like you send your old PlayStation 4 in and give them like a check for $100 and they send you back a Neo.
That's
and I'm
not happening. No.
I would love to visit your timeline, sir, but I don't think that's happening in our world.
I don't know who came up with that idea.
I've seen that a few
not
places.
Happening.
It's like, oh, that would be really cool if they did that. I'm like, yes, it would, but it's not. It would be really cool if they sent us all like teacup piglets,
or
but
free
it's not going to happen.
PlayStation VRs. Yeah,
right. Maybe buying a PlayStation VR could just get you free VR for life from Sony. That'd be cool too. It's like, as long as we're making shit up. But like, I wonder how this will be received. Like, so many people have bought PlayStation 4s, and then to be told all of a sudden it's like, oh, you have the old one now.
Oh, there are people pissed off on Sifted about it. I've seen tons of comments about it already. Mm-hmm. People that are like, wait, I just got this like 2 months ago. Like, I feel like I just got scammed.
Yeah, I feel like Sony is going to have some kind of like contingency plan or some kind of like incentive plan to sort of like make it up to recent PS4 purchase. I mean, I bought my PS4 at launch. I don't feel all that screwed, really.
Yeah, I've already got my money's worth
I got
out of my
plenty
PlayStation 4 already.
Yeah, but like to someone who bought it in the last 6 months or like 8 months, 9 months, I'd be furious.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, come on. Like,
I mean, look, one of the good things that was in the documentation was that, according to Sony, it's not going to allow games to not run well on the base system. And according to Giant Bomb, that's something that was listed over and over in the documentation, is the parity has to stay there with the old system. You can't sacrifice quality on the original system to make it...
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's definitely... They're making an effort to make it so like you won't be playing the base system and be like, oh, if I had a Neo, this would run so much better.
Which it will.
It will, maybe, or at least it'll look better.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know. For me, that would irritate the hell out of me. But I am a tech, I want the best.
You're an early adopter.
And so like, but I don't know how like your standard consumer, the people who make the PlayStation 4 a multi-million seller, not the core audience that we're not as many of us. I wonder like your average guy or average girl who plays this system thinks of someone who I picked up PlayStation 4 because I want to play Bloodborne, or I want to play like new Maddens, or I want to play like, what are those people going to think that all of a sudden there's this better one? Are they going to care? My instinct says they probably won't that much, but I don't know. I don't know what that consumer thinks. I don't know what the research is. That's a question for Pactor, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, the other big question too is, what is Sony counting on? Is it counting on people who already own a PlayStation 4 to upgrade? Or is it assuming that they're not going to, and they're just trying to reach out to new consumers with this new model?
I don't know. That's a really good question. My main question is probably that. Like, who is this for? Because like that's a lot to ask of your existing consumer base.
I mean, look, they've already sold 40-some million worldwide. Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of those original machines out there already. I mean, that's better. That's like 4 times the Wii U already.
Yeah.
Like, that's nothing to scoff at. I mean, Nintendo's getting some flack from Nintendo fans for killing the Wii U already. So,
and clearly they're not killing the PlayStation 4, but like they've certainly made that machine I paid for look less attractive all of a sudden through ways that I wouldn't have thought.
Well, they kind of subtly did that. Like, they released that new version that runs quieter and consumes less power. But, the average person has no clue that happened.
Right.
This is going to be highly published. Like, it'll probably be, even though the news is already broke, it will probably still end up being one of the top 10 stories of E3 this year.
As I did like someone, I don't remember, I think it was Twitter or maybe something else, where like they said like, oh, I guess this is what they meant by greatness awaits.
Yeah. That's pretty good.
Which is, and This is a hard sell. Like, this is a hard move, and I'm interested.
I mean, you're going to upgrade though, right? You're going to get a Neo.
Probably.
I am.
If only because, like, No Man's Sky will probably run a lot better on it. You know, it's like, I mean, really, that's what it comes down to. It's like, you know, I am going to have a very hard time resisting the idea of playing Uncharted 4 in Neo mode. You know, like, that's...
For me,
anything else I can play on my PC. No
Yeah.
Man's Sky as well, frankly. But like,
Yeah.
there's something about like being able to play No Man's Sky like on PlayStation 4 on my big TV with all that stuff is going to be cool. And like Uncharted 4 and all the Sony exclusives, like I'd love to see what that would look like even better. You know, what I
Yeah.
can't even imagine. I mean maybe it won't have a Neo mode. I don't know because
Right.
it's being released before that's a requirement.
Too early.
But would it?
But
would
watch, what you're
would
gonna
you put it
start
past
seeing
Naughty
is,
Dog
like-
to do that? It's like.
No, what you're going to end up seeing is you're going to end up seeing like the Neo edition of games that have already come out for PlayStation 4, and hopefully
Or like pay like $10 to upgrade to the Neo edition.
Hopefully they have some program set up where if you already bought it for the base PlayStation 4, you can pay $10 or $5 or whatever, and
I'd also buy the
and
Bloodborne.
download the Neo version.
Yeah, I'd also buy the Bloodborne version of that. Although
Yeah.
I don't know how likely that would be.
Yeah.
I also would like to hear from developers on what they think.
So developers, so Colin from Kind of Funny like railed on the PlayStation Neo, like went off on it and said it was a terrible idea. The whole splitting the user base thing that we've heard dozens, hundreds of times over the years, he kind of went off on that angle. And then I think he probably got a little pushback maybe from like Twitter users and whatnot, and then he tweeted out that he had talked to a couple developers who said that they are not down with it at all and think it's a terrible idea. Obviously, anecdotal evidence of the highest order. It's pretty easy to pick and choose your quotes to back up your point if that's what you're out to do, and I'm not saying that that's what he did, but...
I mean, it's not like they have to sell a different version of the game or anything.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and look, for me the one comforting thing is that Sony is looking out for its original customers and trying to mandate that
Like no extra unlockables, no extra bonus stuff. Like it's
just resolution, frame rate, whatever. But you know what? They're saying like there won't be like Neo exclusive games. Do you believe that, Matt?
maybe for the first year.
Yeah, I don't believe that at all.
Like eventually you're going to hit a point where like, like what if we're talking about Crazy Town here, but like what if like Star Citizen decides, we could probably do a Neo version, but we can't do a base version. What do you say? And if you're Sony, you probably say okay.
Yeah, because I mean that's the thing. It's like there might be some PC games out there that the developers are like, I really don't feel like trying to make this work on a lower powered console.
Or what if you hit a point where Call of Duty's like, well, the multiplayer, the difference in performance means that people playing on the base version have a distinct disadvantage.
I mean, look, I know you're just using that as an excuse, but specifically with Call of Duty, that will never happen.
Probably not.
Call of Duty is the king of lowest common denominator because their audience is so massive. But a game like Star Citizen,
right?
I could see that being possible. Like, that's a weird position Sony's going to be put in eventually, is these developers and publishers coming to them and being like, look, we know what your mandate is, that like this needs to run on the base PlayStation 4, but we can't get it to run on the base PlayStation 4. We think we can get it to run on Neo. Do you think Sony's really going to say, no, we don't want that game on our platform?
I mean, part of that, I think, depends on how well the Neo sells. But, like, if they feel comfortable with how the Neo user base is going, like, maybe so. I mean, it's just, it's not like, Nintendo did the same thing with the new 3DS. There's games that only run on that, and they kind of stepped away from that after Xenoblade. But now you're seeing this thing where, like, all I can think of when I know the PlayStation Neo documents, like, really seem to warn against this situation. But you keep thinking about Hyrule Warriors Legends.
Yeah,
where
it
like
won't run on the old 3DS.
I mean, yes, it runs on the original 3DS, but
if you count
it's not
like 12 frames per
playable,
second.
really. It's like, and and obviously the documents that were leaked with the Neo here, like say, basically say like that situation is not acceptable. Like they're saying you're not allowed to do that. But we've seen plenty of times in this industry and other industries that you start with these really rigid, rules about that, and after a while you start to bend them a little bit because you got to get these higher level, higher tech things out there.
Wasn't there some kind of a mandate where also PlayStation 4 base games had to run at 1080p?
They don't now. So
right.
I don't,
That's why I found that curious. I was like, well, wait a minute. Like most PlayStation 4 games aren't 1080p right now.
Yeah, I don't know how you would enforce that because they haven't even been able to do that now, let alone in the next few years.
Yeah. So,
the other thing is I really don't feel like this generation has really gotten going fully yet. So like it's weird to me that all of a sudden there's this crazy new upgrade thing.
Is this happening again in 3 years?
If it works,
Is
maybe.
this what it is now?
I hope.
And if that's the case, maybe it is just called PlayStation Neo.
Yeah.
Or whatever final name they decide on,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just kind of the name for their console brand going forward,
PlayStation Now.
or whatever they call
PlayStation
it.
Now-ish.
Yeah, now-ish. But that's what I'm saying. Like, it could just become like they're going to become iterative. I mean, look, Apple kind of does that whole like S, which is like the middle version
Right.
of something.
Like, we don't want to use the new number, but
Maybe
like,
the PlayStation. This is going to be called like the PlayStation 4S or something like that. And then
I
when
think Neo. I mean, maybe not Neo, but something to really differentiate it from. I could see it. What if this is the PlayStation 4 Neo, and then the next upgrade is the PlayStation 5, and it's a bigger upgrade,
they do a
and they do
PlayStation
PlayStation
5
5 Neo,
Neo.
and that becomes kind of the iterative standard from now on, just
Yeah.
like the numbered iPhones with the S's.
Yeah, I mean, even with this new information, my stance hasn't really changed on this hardware from when we were talking about it when it was just leaks. I still don't see where it will split the user base, because Sony is mandating that all the games still have to run on the base model. I mean, sure, you may get frame rate envy or resolution envy and wish that you could afford to buy the Neo or whatever, but the fact of the matter is that console that you bought, and even if you just bought it last week, it's not like it's worthless. Like, it still plays every
Right.
game that's ever released for the PlayStation 4. It will play everyone going forward, allegedly.
Probably, yeah.
Likely, maybe, possibly.
Until
I mean, it sucks. I would agree with anybody who
It's
just bought
certainly
a PlayStation
annoying.
4.
Yeah,
I
I
would
wouldn't
be
say it
pissed
splits-
off if it were me. I'd be really pissed off if it were me.
I
And
wouldn't
get
say
it.
it splits the user base, though. Yeah, because
Yeah.
you can still play everything. You're just playing, no more than having like a lesser video card splits the PC user base.
Yeah.
But it's just annoying because it's a new problem with console gaming. We haven't really had this before.
Yeah.
Where it's like, someone else who also has a PlayStation 4 might be playing a better looking version of the same game you have.
Yep, and going back to what you were saying, like, I honestly want it more for PlayStation VR.
Yeah.
Because, they're saying that's not what it's for. But me personally, like, that's what I want it the most for, because I am pretty much 80% convinced at this point that PlayStation VR is going to be the head-mounted display. I think it's going to be the most popular. I think it's going to be the one that has the most content. And it like teeters on the power of the machine that it's running on. Like, I just don't feel like it's quite up to where it needs to be that compelling experience. So
Maybe that's what they're banking on, that like someone will find the PlayStation VR to be a compelling experience to the point that upgrading it into a more compelling experience with the Neo will be worth the amount of money they would. I mean, you're already in it for $400 on the headset.
Yeah.
So
And here's the other question: what about those what about bundles now for PlayStation VR? Are those bundles going to come with the Neo, or are they going to come with the base PlayStation? I mean, I'm guessing they're going to bundle it with the Neo.
I would say, I mean, yeah, you've got like the PlayStation VR experience, basically.
And so
for
that
like
kind of
$800
acts as a Trojan horse to get the Neo into homes. If you can only buy bundles with the Neo and you can't buy it with the base machine. I mean, it would be dumb to sell bundles with the base machine.
Yeah.
And then you wonder too if like that extra
Which
little
explains why there isn't one.
yeah
As well.
yeah. And then you wonder if that extra little breakout box that comes with PlayStation VR, if that technology will be built into the Neo, so you don't have that extra piece of hardware sitting next to your PlayStation 4 while you're
Or
using
if the Neo is designed with that breakout box in mind, so that breakout box can do other more interesting things. Or I figure breakout box still handles the video signal stuff, and that takes that off the Neo, and that it's good to have that there. I think.
Yeah.
Probably works the same. I would think, just because it takes the burden off the system hardware itself. I don't know. I am very interested to see where this goes, and it does introduce a weird schism in the PlayStation user base that usually only exists between owners of competing brand consoles, where like the PlayStation 4 owners are usually pretty pleased that like they've got the better running version of whatever multi-platform game versus the Xbox One version.
Yeah.
And that's always been kind of the console war ideal, is like, well, on my system it runs better.
Right. Yeah.
And now you have that same divide between PlayStation 4 users internally, and you got to wonder if like, are you gonna there was that I'm wondering if you're gonna run into a kind of a split in the same way that you had like in the old days of PC gaming, like you had the high ping bastards and the low
Right.
ping bastards.
Yeah,
and all
I
that.
forgot.
I'm wondering if like you're gonna hit a thing where
HPB.
ban that guy, kick that guy because he's clearly on a Neo and he's got a better frame rate than us, so he's winning. That kind of thing. I wonder how that will become like an excuse.
Well, then you start talking about like advertising and marketing. I mean, you can pretty much guarantee every commercial for a PlayStation 4 game is
use
going
Neo
to
footage.
show the Neo version running.
Yeah.
And I mean, already Xbox One is looking a little rough around the edges compared to PlayStation 4. I mean, think about how bad it's going to get in like a year and a half when you're looking at that Neo footage versus Xbox
we can look
One.
forward to the Xbox Windows 10 edition.
Yeah.
Because that's coming. at
Oh,
some point,
yeah.
Especially if the Neo takes off.
It also makes me wonder if Microsoft maybe rethinks its strategy. There's rumors that came out yesterday that Microsoft is working on several iterations of Xbox One.
I'm sure they're kicking tons of ideas around in there. It's interesting to me that like, especially compared to like what happened with Sony and Microsoft last generation, that Sony has turned things around so hard
that
they're comfortable trying to releasing a new iteration of their own console.
It feels like it can get away with this.
Yeah.
But look, I think it can and it will.
Yeah.
Like there's going to be some angry people that just bought their console in the last couple of months. But look, the cat's out of the bag now. People now, if you buy a PlayStation 4, that's all on you because another one's coming. So if you buy one now, that's your own fault.
And I think what they're banking on and what they'll probably pull off is the idea that like, okay, people like us who've been playing game consoles forever, like this is new, this is weird territory, this is like a crazy shift.
Unless you're a PC gamer.
Unless you're a PC gamer. But I'm also a PC gamer, and I still think this is a pretty wacky
That's a
shift.
good point, yeah.
But if you're more of a casual gamer who just sort of buys a console to play your games and you don't really care about that whole history and the whole, like, you're probably much more familiar with the mobile phone upgrade, the smartphone upgrade path. And you might not think of this as particularly weird. You might think, oh, I guess PlayStation is kind of doing the same thing Apple and Android do, and that's just how it is. And like you just sort of accept it. Like I wonder if that'll be what they're banking on.
I don't look at the PC as like, well, you have a much better rig than I do, so we have separate platforms. And I think console players, are going to have to adjust to that way of thinking. But if you've been playing PC all this time, it's nothing new.
No.
I can still play pretty much all the same games that you do. My rig probably cost a fifth of what yours did. I can still play it. I wish I had your PC so I could play games on it instead of what I have. But it still looks pretty damn good, my PC, and it runs everything almost on ultra with great frame rates and everything. So there's always going to be envy. But I think ultimately the console, and look, a lot of people who have a PlayStation 4 are PC gamers, and they're already there. They're already there in that headspace. And
I'll admit, if I didn't have, if I didn't enjoy a lot of Sony's exclusive stuff, I probably wouldn't have one either.
Yeah. But I think people will come around and they'll get to a place eventually. All the people who are pissed off that they just got a PlayStation 4 will get over it, and they won't be the vocal minority anymore.
And if you're big on VR, I think, this is where you're going. I mean, you can't be frugal with the VR stuff, folks.
Yeah.
You're going to spend a lot of money for this new little revolution in technology, and that's just how it's going to be. And pick your battle, obviously. But I think if you're in hard for PlayStation VR, you are going to probably, the Neo's probably already on your list.
Yeah. And just speaking about VR, just briefly, we were talking about it before the show started, but VR is not off to a good start.
No, a lot of manufacturing problems.
Yeah. And in fact, some of the games are already dropping in price after just being on the market for 2 weeks because there's just no install base.
There's no one to, because tons of people have bought them, but they haven't gotten them yet.
And so I wonder if that might poison the well for PlayStation VR as its release date nears. Is this
I don't
bad
know about
news
that,
keeps
but
rolling out?
I think that's going to entirely depend on how many people who have pre-ordered the thing get it on the day it comes out.
Yeah.
Because that's the big thing, is people who ordered Oculuses and Vives are like, well, I haven't gotten it. I just keep getting updates saying, 2 more months. Whereas if Sony, Sony has a lot of manufacturing muscle. If they can produce enough PSVRs to meet demand, and if
as long as the component manufacturers are able to feed them the components.
But Sony has those channels. So, Sony is the only one of these three that is, a hardware manufacturer.
Yeah, it has been for a long time. Yeah.
So they know the pitfalls. They know how to get this stuff done. And so I'm wondering if if Sony ends up being the only one that can actually get these units in people's hands when they pay for them, that might be a tremendous advantage in itself.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
inferior hardware or not inferior hardware, having the hardware is better than not having it. Hopefully, Oculus and Vive have figured out their wrinkles by October, but they've lost a lot of goodwill so far from people who paid them a lot of money for these things.
Do you think we'll see games running on Neo at E3?
I would hope so. I mean,
do you think Sony will put out its own comparison video showing base PlayStation 4, PlayStation 4 Neo?
Oh, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what else can you do?
It's like they're almost competing with themselves.
Yeah.
It's really crazy.
I mean, I figure you pick one or two specific games to show that, and maybe I'm sure one of them will be one of the big VR games.
Yeah. I mean, look, they could have known about this all along. Like Uncharted, Naughty Dog could have known about this a year ago. Sony could. Maybe that's why it was delayed.
You never know.
I mean, a lot of these developers have worked on PC games. They know how to build engines that scale to better hardware. So it may not even be a case where they really need people to retrofit games or anything like that. Like these games may just look better and run better on Neo organically.
And you got to wonder, okay, what if? So let's say they launched the PS5. But the PS5 has a very similar architecture to what the PS4 and the PS4 Neo had. Will you be able to buy upgrades of PS4 titles that you own to play them on the PlayStation 5 and look better?
Or your PlayStation 4 games just play on the PlayStation 5 in a even higher resolution and better frame rate.
Yeah.
I mean, it could just...
I mean, there's no auto-scaling.
Basically what they're doing is they're creating backwards compatibility. They're creating a PC with their name on it. That's really all it is. That's what consoles have become. A PC with a different brand, with a brand name on it. And it does open the door. I mean, look, you don't have to create special chips anymore to make consoles work backwards compatibility wise. It's they should just work now.
And the thing I keep thinking about with this is okay, so they're doing this. Microsoft clearly is kicking around the same kind of ideas. By the end of this year, the console space in that regard could look very, very different.
Yeah.
What if the NX doesn't realize that?
Yeah.
And once again, through no fault of their own, really, Nintendo's new system looks outdated already.
Well, it would be a fault of their own if they decide to be cheap with it and create the system. And the rumors swirling right now is it's around the power of PlayStation 4. That's not good enough. That's not good enough. It has to be easily...
If it was good enough, Sony wouldn't be releasing another one.
Exactly. It needs to be better than that. And so hopefully we'll be finding that. It's crazy to think in a month and a half, all these questions that we've had for 10 or 11 months are going to be answered.
This is going to be...
all the conjecture, all the leaks, all the rumors that we've been talking about, finally we're going to get answers for that in 8 weeks.
Yeah, well, it's going to be...
Not even 8 weeks.
Because last year's E3 was almost like a celebration.
Yeah.
We got all these things we'd always wanted, and Sony delivered on Shenmue and Final Fantasy and all this stuff. And in Last Guardian... Man, that'll probably look way better on the Neo.
Yeah.
But it was almost last E3 was almost like a wish fulfillment train,
Yeah.
and this year it's going to be the ground's going to move, this is going to be shockwaves, in some way. There's a lot of stuff's going to change here, I think, and
big time changes.
I think some of us are going to sit back and have to think about what we're going to do here in terms of where we're going to put our money, what we're going to put our faith in a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be a big sell job for VR at E3 this year, too.
Yeah, a lot of things. That's the thing is, Sony's got to sell VR. A lot of people got to sell VR, but Sony also has to sell VR. Sony has to sell this Neo thing. Present this in a way that sells it to us. Nintendo has to present the NX and sell it to us in, whatever they've got.
Microsoft has to show us some damn games.
Yeah, Microsoft has to prove to us that we should still have
an Xbox
One. There's a lot of proving oneself going to happen, and going to have to happen in E3. I don't know if it will happen because, certainly we've seen people, these companies drop the ball from now and again, but a lot is on the line for this E3. It's huge. It's going to be
the console war is over. The numbers came out. EA once again leaked out numbers. Again,
EA loves doing that.
It's the second time it's done it, where it's outed Microsoft's hardware install base.
And its response is oops.
Yeah. Well,
what are you
the
doing?
first time maybe that flies. The second time it doesn't. But basically at this point, PlayStation 4 has doubled Xbox One.
Yep.
Doubled. So that it's over.
Yeah.
It's game over.
This is PlayStation 2 all over again.
The truth of the matter is that, if NX really makes a splash, it might be like NX versus Xbox
Yeah, it
One
could be Sony
for, like,
versus
the real
Nintendo
race.
again.
Yeah.
For the, Microsoft might not even care.
Yeah.
Microsoft might be backing off this and waiting until like to see what happens here, and then they could you jump in later with another Xbox, which would be kind of more like a Steam box thing.
Yeah.
But like I do have big question marks about where Microsoft intends to go now.
Well, I'll put it to you this way: the other day, my Xbox One wouldn't turn on, and I fiddled with it for like 2 hours. Couldn't get it to turn on because it happened once before, and it was in the middle of like a firmware update because it just does it on its own. And so I was petrified. I'm like, well, if it's in the middle of a firmware update and it's shut down, like doing its thing, like if I pull the plug out, it could like brick my Xbox One.
Right.
So I let it sit there for like 2 hours after it wouldn't turn on, and I tried to turn it on again. It wouldn't turn on. So I tear everything out of my entertainment center because it's wired in. My DirecTV goes into it. Everything's connected to it because Microsoft told me to. And I tear everything out. I'm like, oh, crap, man. At least I can watch some 3D content again. That's nice. On a whim, I go over, plug in my Xbox One, the thing turns on. And at that moment, I just thought about it, and I was like, that really sucks. One.
Yeah.
Two, I'm pissed off that I was convinced to like wire my whole entertainment center around this thing. And I'm like, but three, I'm not really going to miss it.
No. Are you not going to wire the DirecTV back through it, are you?
I might. I had an epiphany, though. I was like, I don't play games on this thing, like, hardly at all. Like, I had just played Quantum Break. Before that, I had played, like, Tomb Raider. Like, it has turned into, like, a Nintendo console for me, where I only use it to play exclusives, and I don't play, like, any third-party stuff on it. Like, I play all my games on my PlayStation 4 now. That's just the way it's become, and so one thing I would say is as soon as I unplugged that Xbox One, the quality of my television picture improved immediately. Like, people have argued with me about this. Like, it's not hurting it is definitely compromising the signal of your television. Without a doubt. It was like night and day once I unplugged that thing and looked at my TV again. I was like, oh my gosh, like, now it looks 1080p instead of this weird place in between like 720 and 1080. So to answer your question, like, I don't know if I'm going to plug it back in. Maybe, like, send my TV through it. Like, I don't have
my TV through it.
I do. I've had it that way since launch. I do like the ability, just like as I'm walking out the door, to say Xbox turn off, and it just turns it off, and I don't have to fiddle around with remotes. And it's nice that my wife can do that and not screw up everything, because before this, like, I have, like, literally on the back of our TV remotes, I have keys. It says input 1, like DirecTV, input 2, PlayStation. That's for her, because after years and years, she still could not figure out how to turn everything on and off without screwing stuff up. So when I would turn on the TV, it'd just be like static. I'd be like, what did she do? So I do like that part of it, where she can just turn it on and off, and it works for her, and it doesn't screw me over when I go to turn it on later. But is it worth it, like wiring it all together again? I don't know. We'll see. It's still, my Xbox One is still sitting on the kitchen table because I really have no use for it right now. So, yeah, E3 is going to be huge. Mm-hmm. It's going to be really huge. So, I think that's pretty much all the information we have on Neo at this point.
Yeah.
I don't think we missed any.
I certainly believe this news, though.
Oh, yeah. I definitely believe this news. Yeah, again, because I know Jeff Gerstmann, and I work with Jeff Gerstmann, and I know he's crazy aggro about stuff like this, and I know he would not have let Giant Bomb run this unless he felt 100% comfortable with it. And so
that's why I felt comfortable commenting on it. I sent you a text. I'm like, Neo? And you're like, what? And I'm like, Giant Bomb just reported that this. It's like, I was pretty sure that wasn't like some kind of weird rumor bullshit thing, because I'm like, well, if Giant Bomb says it, they must know something.
No, they never break anything.
No.
And so to break a big story like that, one, congratulations, but two, I know that they did their due diligence and made sure it was legit. So I'm sure we talk about Neo again.
Oh, yeah.
This won't be the last time on Game Face, but that's pretty much all the facts we have right now.
When a price shows up.
Yeah. But before we move on, what do you guess for price?
Between 400 and 500?
No, guess the price.
I would hope 400.
400. So $399, 400.
I can't see you getting away with charging more than the original PlayStation 4 price for it.
So I'm going to go, and this is weird because, usually consoles aren't priced this way. I'm going to go with $449.99 because I don't think Sony's going to want to drop the original PlayStation 4 below $300. I think they're going to want to keep it at $299, and I don't think that they would do that if the price is only $100 more for a PlayStation Neo. I think Neo needs to be more than $100 more for them, if anything, to just clearly demonstrate the value of Neo over the original PlayStation 4. So I'm going to go with $449.99.
$449.
Yep, we'll see.
All right.
But it's time to move on to the next topic.
If they do that, I think that proves that they are not looking to get too many of us who already have a PlayStation 4 to upgrade.
Yeah.
Because charging me $400 for the PlayStation 4 at launch and then expecting me to pay more than that for the upgrade to be that makes me go.
Yeah.
So
we'll see.
We'll see.
All right, so let's move on. So, like I said, there weren't a ton of stories this week, but one of the big stories was Insomniac just going buck wild.
Yeah.
It literally announced 3 games in a day. Announced 2 brand new games in a day while showing new footage for its indie game that it's working on and doing press tours for the Oculus game that it had already announced months ago. So, it got me thinking. One thing I would say about Insomniac, people always ask me, if you could work for any game developer, which game developer would you work for? And I've always said, 1, that I only have a passing interest in making games. But 2, if there was one developer that I would work for, if they offered me a job, it was Insomniac. And a big part of that, 1, is that they make games that I really like. I'm a big fan of platformers and the style of games that they make. 2, they make amazing games. So working there would be really, really prestigious and something you could be proud of. But 3, the people there are freaking awesome. Everybody that I know that works at Insomniac are incredible people.
Also, Insomniac is continually rated one of the top
places to work
10
in the United States.
mid-sized companies to work at in the entire country, over and over and over.
Also, they're in LA, so if I were to work there, I wouldn't have to relocate or anything.
And they're always, visiting there even just to do press stuff is a pleasure.
Yeah.
All the time. They have fresh muffins every morning. They work really, really hard over there, but they take care of their people.
And here's the thing: Ted Price, the founder of Insomniac, is a great dude.
Yeah.
And you can see with companies like that, if you have the guy who founded the company, he's a good person, it trickles down into the rest of the company.
And he's done the work. That's the
Right.
thing is he, when they made their first game, Disruptor.
Yep.
And in order to get the code done, they didn't have any computers that could do it. So Ted coded the first build of Disruptor on graph paper, and they coded that into the computer, and that was the first version of it they showed Sony.
Yeah.
And that's crazy.
No, he's the man. I love Ted.
So the people who run this company, they've been in the trenches. They've done that. They've done the work. They know what all the people who are working for them are going through, and that shows, I think, from top to bottom at Insomniac.
Yeah. So I wanted to share my admiration for the company before I tear them down, because that's basically what I'm going to do. I think Insomniac is going off in the wrong direction right now.
Yeah.
So let's talk first about Ratchet and Clank for the PlayStation 4. Amazing game. It looks great. It's reviewed really well. I still have no idea why they made this game. I know there's a movie.
I think they go with the movie.
And they're trying to do the movie type. But look, they could have made a new Ratchet and Clank game and released the movie, and it still would have worked basically exactly the same.
Sort of, but I think they're also hoping for a lot of new fans to come in through the movie. And if you do that, you want them to kind of play this game as sort of the introduction to things as well.
Why wouldn't you have them play this game that's bleeding edge and has all your brand new ideas in it instead of this?
Because it does have a lot of their new ideas in it.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't have any new ideas in it. It's like a potpourri of all the Ratchet games so far. So it has the base story, levels, design of the original game, but then it has weapons and power-ups from the subsequent games. But there's nothing new in it per se.
Well, there's new planets, and there's a couple of there's new scenes. There is some new to it. It's obviously a remake, not a remaster.
Right, but it's not a game that if they just started a game from scratch, it's not up to scratch of what I believe, at least personally, that new game would be.
As far as a brand new Ratchet, probably
right.
Not.
And so I feel like they've taken a half step there. I guarantee they spent not as much time as they would have if they built a game from scratch, obviously. But they spent a significant amount of time working on this game. That's the first misstep that I have. Second misstep.
I don't think we know that's a misstep until we see how the movie does, in conjunction with how the game does.
I don't know how much that's related, though.
I think that
they may get some royalties based on the gate for the movie.
Not royalties. You're talking about mind share. You're talking about people. A lot more people, would potentially watch these movies than have played these games.
Do you think the Ratchet movie is going to do well?
I have no idea.
I would be surprised if it does really well.
We'll see. It's a CG movie with a lot of personality targeted at families, and those have a tendency to do well whether they're good or not.
Yeah.
So, if it's marketed properly, maybe. I don't know what the secret to marketing these, because I've seen trailers for some of those CG movies, and I'm just like, that looks like complete garbage, and they're number one for 3 weeks in a row. I don't know what the secret is. I followed the movie.
Well, it's a babysitter. I mean,
Yeah.
it's some place to take your kids where they're going to shut up for 3 hours,
Yeah.
and you can kick back and drink a soda and eat some popcorn.
And I think Ratchet, if you see a commercial for Ratchet, that probably fits the bill well enough, at least as well as any DreamWorks movie you could name.
Yeah.
So maybe it will. It doesn't have a whole lot of competition in that space around its release date. So maybe it will do okay. I mean, I don't know. CG movies are very hard for me to predict, and I followed the box office since I was a child.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
I just have
if
a problem
the Croods
seeing-
can be a hit, this thing can be a hit.
I just have a problem seeing the big upside for this remake. I
think it's just maybe a little conventional wisdom, maybe a little too conventional wisdom. Is it like, hey, you got a big movie coming out based on your game property? Make sure there's a game out there for them to buy. Make sure there's an action.
I mean, they're doing what people have complained about for decades in this industry, is having that companion video game to go along with the movie.
But no one does that anymore.
Yeah,
it's all mobile games
because
now.
everybody complained.
But because
they were terrible.
They were low quality games. But
Right.
one of the most fondly remembered games of 2 generations ago is Spider-Man 2.
Yeah.
Because they actually had some ideas in there. They had some cool stuff in there. And if you're assuming that one of the major purchasers of this Ratchet game are going to be parents that took their kids to this movie, those kids have never played a Ratchet game before.
Yeah.
This is their introduction to this world. So I think that is what they're thinking. I'm not saying it's a good idea. I'm not saying it's going to be a successful idea, but that is the thinking. They're not making this move out of complete randomness.
Well, I didn't say that. So, what would you rather have? Would you rather have a new Ratchet and Clank game, or pie in the sky, completely brand new IP, or a remake of the first Ratchet game?
Me personally, I would rather have a new Ratchet game, like a brand new Ratchet game. But I understand why they're doing it this way, and I will play the remake as well. I just like playing Ratchet.
Well, they're great games. All of them have been great.
Yeah.
So,
and I understand why they're going with that. I hope it leads to more. I hope we don't have to wait for another Ratchet movie to get another Ratchet game.
let me rephrase the question then. Let me ask: if you were an investor in Insomniac, what would you rather have Insomniac do?
In this
Let's
situation,
say they were a publicly held company, you're a stockholder.
in this situation.
Yeah,
I would want them to make the remake.
The remake?
Yeah,
Why?
because that is what you want them to buy. People don't want something that doesn't resemble what they just played or what they just saw. That's one of the reasons I think Mad Max didn't do as well, because it wasn't directly recognizable as based on the Fury Road movie.
I disagree with that. I honestly do not see a huge part of the people who go to see the film. One, I don't see a lot of people going to see the film who haven't played the original Ratchet. I think most people who are going to see this film are people who are fans of Ratchet and Clank.
I think you're wrong.
Really?
I think that most of the people who are going to see this movie are parents and their children, and those children have never played Ratchet and Clank.
I disagree with that. I think it's going to be a fan move. I think the fans...
There are not enough fans of that game.
The series has been around for 15 years now.
Look, there aren't
going
to... 2001, I think? 2002?
Yeah, 15 years. I mean, you're talking about people who, when they first played Ratchet, they were 5 or 6 years old.
Yeah.
Now they're adults. People like us who were adults when it came out, who are now older adults.
Yeah, much older adults.
Más o menos.
But that's not who these CG movies are made for, is what I'm saying.
I go see CG movies.
Sometimes I do, but I'm not going to go to Toys R Us and look for the figures and see the standee for the game and be like, "Oh, Mom, get me that game," because that's your audience.
So you're saying that you think this remake will sell more than if they made a new Ratchet and Clank game?
I think that is the conventional marketing in wisdom. I don't know if that's
completely
wrong.
disagree with that. Completely.
Well, do we know sales on this yet?
No, it just came out.
out.
And it is a discounted title. It's $40, I think. So they're not going to generate as much revenue. See, that's another thing. They had to sell it at $20 less because it's a remake of an old game. Whereas if they had built a brand new game, it would be selling for $59.99, $20 per unit.
But it would have
you sell
cost
a million
them more.
units, that's $20 million of profit.
But it would have cost them more to make. So that's why you sell
Not
something
that
less.
much more.
But if you know you're going to sell it for $20 less, you don't throw that much budget at. Like they know what they're doing. They've done this forever. You know, they know how to.
But this is what I'm saying, and this whole topic is I am starting to wonder if they do know what they're doing. That's the whole point of this, and this is just the first example of it.
In the case of the Ratchet thing, I think they know exactly what they're doing, and they're doing the right thing in terms of like how they're trying to capitalize on their own property, their IP being taken by Hollywood and turned into this movie.
Or they're being led by the nose by Hollywood, and this was all something that was pitched to them, and they're like, "That sounds like a good idea. Sure, that'll take us a year to develop the game."
Possibly, but I'm tempted to give Ted Price more credit than that.
It's a big company now.
Yeah, but like,
it's not just Ted running everything anymore.
No, it's not. But I think if that was really something that he thought was going to damage Insomniac, he wouldn't have allowed it to go through.
Okay, so let's move on. Let's start talking about... So, Insomniac has spread its wings a little bit. It released a mobile game. I can't remember the name of it. It came out 4 months ago.
Well, it's not their first one. What was that other one they made like in 2012? You remember that?
I don't remember.
It was like a tablet game, or it was like a web browser game kind of thing.
No, I don't remember it.
Yeah, it had a kind of a Skylanders-y like look to it. It was like you came in and you like. It was like kind of like
maybe someone in chat will remember.
Someone in chat, I sure will, because I remember them coming around and demoing it, and I was like, "This is weird for that." Like, it didn't seem like their kind of thing. They've spent, because that's why I think this is interesting that you're choosing this as a topic, because I think Insomniac has sort of been casting around for a new identity for a while now, especially after Resistance clearly wasn't going to become a staple.
Well, after Sunset Overdrive tanked.
And Sunset Overdrive, yeah, which I love. It's a great game.
We've talked about it a ton of times on the show. It's a great game, but
like they're still kind of looking for what they're going to do other than Ratchet. You know?
Oh, they tried Resistance, that failed. They tried Fuse, which we talked about last week, Fuse. Which was terrible. Yeah. Well, not terrible, but just by their standards, it was terrible.
Yeah.
So anyway, the web game you talked about, which I don't even remember, they put out their first...
Outernauts.
That's
what it was.
They put out their first mobile game,
Thank you, Vinaraba.
4 or 5 months ago, and that, I think part of the proceeds for that was going to charity or something like that, which is awesome. Mm-hmm. But it didn't do well, and it didn't review well. I think the last time I looked at its aggregate, it was at like a 3-point-something or a 4 out of 10 or something like that. And look, I talked to Ted Price at E3 last year, and I invited him to come check out Sifted, and his only comment he gave me about Sifted was that there's not enough mobile game coverage. And that struck me as very odd. I was like, Ted Price? You care about mobile that much? Because, no one on Sifted cares about mobile. Like, we can look at everybody's Sift ratings. We have like a grid that shows the site-wide Sift ratings that everybody has set, and mobile is literally like the lowest rated thing on the whole site, like lower than like music and rhythm and like party games. Like,
welcome to Windows 10, by the way.
Oh, look, there it is. so they dipped their toe into mobile. It didn't go exceptionally well. And then the next game we hear about is this game called Song of the Deep, which is like this indie side-scrolling Metroidvania type game, which, if you know Insomniac, I totally get it. They are all old school gamers. They love old Nintendo games. They're big fans of Nintendo's old platformers. I can understand why this might be a passion project for them. I'm not particularly excited for the game. I mean, in this day and age of indie games where you have developers who are putting all their resources towards games like this and coming up with an amazing results, I feel like a lot of times when bigger studios try to do games like this, they end up being a little lesser than the indie guys who are doing it around the clock all the time. It could be great. It could be the best quote-unquote indie game of the year. But I would say right now, just looking at the game, it doesn't look to have anything especially exceptional about it.
No.
I mean, it's little side-scrolling shooter.
I guess it kind of depends on like what their expectations for it are.
Well, I don't think that they think they're going to make $100 million off of it or anything.
But
But what's the point, though? What is the point of making this game?
To have something to do. I don't know.
They don't need something. That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't understand why they're making this game. It could be amazing.
Maybe no one's willing to kind of after Sunset Overdrive and Fuse, maybe they're having trouble getting interest from the publishers for something on that level of budget.
Because a lot of people don't. That could be. I mean, a lot of people don't realize. A lot of people thought that Insomniac was like a part of Sony. Like it never. It never has been.
No.
Like it just had a very comfortable relationship with Sony, where it was. I'm assuming, and I don't know this for a fact, but I'm assuming subsidizing all the games and
would
paying
think.
for probably paying for the whole damn thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, Sony, I think, owns the rights to some of those IPs.
As it should. If it funded the development of them, it makes sense.
Just like Bloodborne.
Or just like if you do like I know the GT guys, like they can't take their show names away from Defy. Like generally how it works when you work in a creative marketplace is if you create something while you're working for someone else and being paid by somebody else, they own whatever you created. And so it makes sense that Sony would retain the rights to Ratchet and anything else that Insomniac made for them, Resistance. But to me, I just don't understand it's almost like it's a pet project for Insomniac, like Song of the Deep. It's like we see all these indie guys doing this stuff, and like...
Maybe it's like a go back to basics sort of thing, you know, like okay, well, Fuse and Sunset Overdrive was great, but nobody bought it. You know, kind of let's pull it back. Let's come back to like what we love about games, what we grew up doing, what we think is like the core of how we do things, and like maybe this stuff is what they came up with. Maybe it's a hey, let's like strip it down to what really matters to us, and that with Insomniac, I would think that would be gameplay and design and look, like even if you tell me that's an Insomniac game we're looking at right now, I believe you because it's got that certain. It's got color, it's got movement, it's very kinetic. It's I get it.
If somebody told you that, you'd believe it, but would you guess that just watching it?
Well, no, because I associate Insomniac with Ratchet and Clank and Resistance.
Yeah.
Like I think they're looking a little bit for an identity here.
Okay, so that was red flag number 2. I don't want to spend like an hour on this topic, although I'm really passionate about Insomniac. I probably could talk an hour about it, but we need to keep moving along. So that was kind of red flag number 2. Red flag number 3 for me was Edge of Nowhere. And so...
This is the mountain climbing?
It's like the Sherpa action adventure for
Sherpa Simulator
Oculus.
2016, yeah.
But this wasn't really a red flag for me, because this is the part of
They
Insomniac...
use red flags to mark the path. You could make a nice turn of phrase with that one.
Because to me, this actually kind of speaks to Insomniac's DNA, because it pushes technological boundaries. Like their programmer who built their engines, like basically ended up building all the engines for all PlayStation exclusives for the PlayStation 3 era. Well, it's Mark Cerny, who now is like a big wig at Sony, and he's like working in the technology department, but he's the one who helped build all the engines in Insomniac.
Gave us Knack.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe I shouldn't have brought him up after all, but... So I got it. When I first saw that they were doing a game for Oculus, I was like, that makes sense. Like, they love pushing the boundaries. They like working on new platforms and new hardware. They love pushing paradigms, finding what's capable, what's possible out of pieces of hardware. This is like their VR pet project that they're going to do for Oculus. And I assume that, it's probably partially funded by Oculus, blah, blah, blah. I was cool with it. I was also cool with the fact that Insomniac was trying to make a more traditional-looking game work in VR. And they're really great at gameplay, so I had a lot of faith that they'd be able to do that. Like, that's the one thing you can never say about Insomniac is that one of its games does not play well. Like, their games always play exceptionally. And so I was really excited about it. So then comes this week. And so this week, they put out a bunch of new press for this game, for Edge of Nowhere. They put out a bunch of new press for Song of the Deep. But they also announced 2 brand new games. The first game that they announced was called Feral Rights. And I'm still not 100% certain what Feral Rights is. It's kind of like this brawler fighting game for Oculus, exclusively for Oculus, coming out in Q4. It looks like a really weird game. Insomniac's never really made like a fighting game before. I mean, obviously they have some experience with hand-to-hand combat and melee, working on the Ratchet series, but it's never really made like a fighter or a brawler before. So, one, I thought the genre was kind of curious, but what really shocked me was that it is an Oculus exclusive. And, like, I see this, and then literally like 3 hours later, the first story breaks about Job Simulator for Vive getting a price cut after 2 weeks. Permanent, by the way. The developers are like, this is permanent. And so I realized, I'm like, yeah, there's no installed base for these head-mounted displays at all. Now, granted, this game is coming end of the year. There should be a bigger installed base there. But I still found it to be a curious choice. Because, look, the way I look at it is like, every game that it's making for anything is time taken away that they could be doing something else. Like, Song of the Deep, same way. Like a mobile game, same way. Sure, they may have a separate mobile team there, but all those people have value. They're all talented. They all could be pitching in on working on other games. It's not like they have to work on a mobile game. Like those people could work on other games and make new IP or whatever, or make a new Ratchet instead of a remake or whatever. So it's just human equity that's being spent someplace else when it could be spent on something at least I personally would much rather see. And so on the same day, they also announced another brand new exclusive game for Oculus, and it's called The Unspoken. And this game actually kind of reminds me, remember that demo that they did for PlayStation VR on stage that completely just crapped out and failed, where like they were just standing and like firing like discs at each other?
Tron thing, yeah.
This game is actually looks a little bit like that. It's kind of like a magic dueling game set in what appears to be modern day.
It's called Urban Fantasy.
Yeah, whatever it's called. Again, another Oculus exclusive game. So right now we're staring at, okay, what are Insomniac's next 3 games? All 3 of them are Oculus exclusive games. It appears...
Well, somebody's got to go in hard on this VR stuff, right?
It appears that Insomniac has turned into a second-party developer for Oculus.
Well, it's not like they were like cranking the hits out for the last like 5 or 6 years, really. I mean, Ratchet sells okay, but it doesn't like keep the studio afloat with 3 separate teams okay, you know? Like, yeah. I can see how they'd be casting around to try to figure out what their next big thing is. And, you know, mobile games, there might be a revenue stream there that's useful to them. So, I mean, no wonder they're interested in that side of things. The Oculus, like, look, Edge of Nowhere looks pretty damn cool to me.
Yeah.
And also, the other thing about all 3 of these games, none of them looks particularly impossible to port to non-Oculus platforms if they just don't work.
Well, these games are built for VR.
Sure,
like
but
they're not, except for maybe Edge of Nowhere.
Yeah, but like Feral Rights, like looking, you know, some kind of fighting. I mean, obviously it depends how much like motion control stuff you're dealing with, but like.
But if they're designed with VR, that means most of it's going to be in a first-person perspective.
Maybe
that changes a lot.
The Unspoken for sure. Feral Rights, I guess we'll see. But you know, again, there's no reason you can't pull the camera back to third person, rework it, release it on a platform in traditional.
Here's the problem with that, Matt. Those games are being published by Oculus Studios.
Oh, well then that's fine.
For who?
If Oculus is funding them, helping funding them for, I mean, that's where you make your money. I mean, you get paid to do a job.
I get that, but I'm saying as someone who likes Insomniac's games, this is a bad move. Like, I want to play what I would consider more traditional Insomniac games, and I don't want to have to play them in VR, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Well, a lot of their...
And I also feel like this is, I mean, sure, they're getting some of it funded by Oculus, maybe all of it, who knows. But to me...
Oculus could afford it, that's for sure.
To me, that is like, it's the road to ruin, I guess is the way I'm looking at it. Like, sure, you're going to turn a profit, and your employees have jobs, and there's revenue coming in, and you can afford to satisfy your payroll. But is that the smart long-term play for a studio like Insomniac? Or is it to
well, then what is?
Further develop the IP that you established and create some new IP that you own? That's how you make your money. That's how you become the next Blizzard.
Is there room for that in the market right now? Because, like, what was the last game that Insomniac made that was like a burn-the-charts-up AAA hit?
I don't know if they've ever had one, to be honest.
Exactly.
But they've had hits. Like, almost every game they've made.
Sure, I mean, the Ratchet, or especially the early Ratchet games, and I would say Tools of Destruction sold very well for a PlayStation 3 game at the time. But they're not, like, you know, they're not a top-tier sales company.
It's hard to know how Resistance would have done if it was open to... I mean, that's the other thing, too. Is it like...
Well, I think that was what the point of Fuse was to find that out. You know, that was kind of like the extension of the Resistance thing into like supposedly a more fertile market, but no one cared.
Yeah, but that game was just low quality. I mean, if you look at its aggregate scores, I think it ended up in the 6 range or something like that. I may be wrong, but I know it did not review exceptionally well. And so but here's the thing. It's like, we don't think that they have any mega hits, but they've always released all their games for one platform. Always. Mm-hmm. Even with Sunset Overdrive. And now they're doing it again with the Oculus.
Fuse was too multi-platform.
Right. But that was also like probably the worst game Insomniac ever released. Mm-hmm. So I don't know that we know what the sales potential could be of Insomniac IP unless it's able to release it on multiple platforms. Mm-hmm. And so all I'm saying is that this is a studio that I have a lot of reverence for, and I admire as a company, and I admire the products that it's put out, and its stance on high quality, and its attention to detail, and the polish it puts on its games, and the corporate culture it has, and the way it interacts with the press. I love everything about Insomniac, and so it's hard for me, at least in my opinion, to see it going down a path that I don't think is a good one.
Well, like, I'm not saying I would prefer to play these VR games than like a standard, AAA Insomniac release, but I think we have to remember that they're basically guns for hire, like any,
But that's what they've turned into, though, is a gun for hire instead of being their own master. You just kind of got to the root of my whole point.
But I think
they're turning into like
a freelancer
when they should be a staff employee.
But they've always been that, is what I'm saying. Like,
yeah.
And like, what if Edge, what if Edge of Nowhere is really good?
It could be. All these games could be great.
Like, what if they become the AAA developer of the Oculus?
I think that's what they are. They already are.
Well, I mean, from a pedigree point of view, sure. But what if they become to Oculus users what they were to PlayStation 2 users?
I mean, what do you think best case scenario is for install base for Oculus a year from now?
I have no idea.
Not even a wild guess.
I don't know.
Best
I
case
really
scenario.
don't.
I mean, I would
Best
say...
case scenario, $6.5 billion. But
really? That's not realistic.
Because every human being on the planet buys one. That's the best case scenario.
A realistic best case scenario.
I really don't know.
I
don't know what the demand for this stuff is.
I would say 5 million. Best case scenario a year from now. If there are 5 million, I think that's even like aiming for the stars.
$1 million a year, considering how many they can produce, yeah, it's pretty optimistic.
Right. So really, best case scenario is probably 2 million. And then you start talking about, okay, what's going to be the attach rate for your games to that 2 million install base? I mean, a really good game is 10% typically.
Yeah, but it's also hard to say because, like, look at these games, and it's like these are some of the few VR games they've shown that I would call actual games.
Right.
So if you're actually looking to play a game and not a toy, which was one of the problems with the Kinect and other things like it, like you're going to gravitate to these Insomniac games. So I would imagine that as long as the games are good, their attach rate will be higher than average. Simply because Insomniac's quality.
Well, a lot of it's going to depend on competition. Are there is there a killer app already that
somewhat? But again, if Oculus is publishing these things, they're going to get a prominent place in the Oculus store or whatever it is they're going to be using and all that stuff. So I'm sure it won't be that hard to discover them. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. If it didn't make financial sense for them, I assume they wouldn't be doing it. I mean, we don't know what else they're doing as well.
Yeah.
I mean, you are looking at a point.
That's stretching pretty thin.
Yeah, well,
I mean, we've been there. We know how big the studio is.
Right. At that point, you're looking at like, well, that's a lot of bandwidth that you're spread across.
Yeah.
And I don't think they have their North Carolina studio anymore, do they?
I don't know actually.
Did
it close?
I don't remember. They made Fuse, I thought.
Yeah,
I thought
I think they did.
They shut that down or something.
Maybe so.
I don't remember. I don't know one way or the other. But I thought I remembered hearing that. But like, yeah, I don't know how many teams they have. I don't know what kind of bandwidth they have. But somebody's got to make this VR stuff. You got to start somewhere, and this seems like a pretty low risk way to do it. If
I just wish it was somebody else.
Well, yeah, I mean, but like, they're not making everything for us. They're trying to figure out, and it could be very advantageous for a company like Insomniac to kind of be the first penguin in the VR water in terms of being a AAA console developer that figures out how to do this. Maybe your sales aren't going to be through the roof, but you are going to be a dependable source of software for people who know the VR scene, and they're going to recommend you to the people who then come into the VR scene and say, what should I get? Like, you should get this Insomniac game because they're great at it, I think that's what they're trying to build on. Same way they were building with Outernauts and on the Facebook platform, and same way they're building on their mobile things. Like, they're trying to be the higher quality mobile developer, the higher quality Facebook developer.
Well, I don't know if I'd agree with that. But
well, I mean, that's what they're trying to be. I don't know if that's what they're going to succeed at doing.
Yeah.
But like, that is where Insomniac's advantage comes in, is their talent and their ability to be like where you play this and you're like, wow, this feels better than a lot of the other stuff I play.
All I can say is I hope at E3 they show a new game that I'm really interested in. Because right now, I mean, I don't have an Oculus, and I'm probably speaking for 90% of the people on Sifted who also don't have Oculus, and speaking for you, who also doesn't have Oculus.
Nope.
I mean, right now, the stuff that they're making, I couldn't even play if I wanted to.
Yep.
So, to me, that's disheartening, and I also think that they're cutting off a huge fan base that they've spent decades building by coordinating all their games off to this platform that nobody owns. I just think it's a bad move. And again, this is coming from a place of love. I love Insomniac, and I just want them to succeed and excel and become one of the premier developers in the industry. Because, I mean, you kind of look at it like, not long ago, most people would have said Insomniac was the better developer. But if you look at them and Naughty Dog now, I don't think anybody would say that. And
we don't have a lot of stuff to compare anymore. That's one of the reasons I do want to play that Ratchet and Clank remake, is because it's been a long time since I played an Insomniac game.
Yeah. Well, you just played Sunset Overdrive.
Yeah, but that was like 2 years ago.
I guess it has been a while now. What have you been doing all this time?
Working
on these VR games?
I mean, this VR stuff, I'm sure, takes a lot of prototyping and a lot
of
practice. I mean, it's a totally new way to make a game, frankly. And, Insomniac does not half-ass anything when it comes to that. They're not going to just make like a standard, survival horror game and put it on a mountain and say, that's our VR game. They're going to dig into it and figure it out. Yeah. So, I mean, I have faith that they're going to, maybe these games they're making might be what makes an Oculus Rift worth owning for me. I mean, I don't disagree that I wish I was, I wish I owned some platforms I knew some more Insomniac games are coming for, but like, I also don't, I also kind of trust their judgment in terms of like where they think they need to go, and if this is what they think they need to try right now, or maybe if they thought like this is going to be a lucrative deal because Oculus wants to give us a lot of money to make these titles, like, I can't begrudge them for that as a business. Yeah. Like, I don't disagree with you. It is like, I wish that there was more like, standard AAA stuff, but after being burned by Sunset Overdrive and Fuse, I can understand why they'd feel like they need to kind of make some kind of pivot.
Or they should just make better games.
You can't make a better game than Sunset Overdrive.
Well, you definitely can, but...
Well, you can, but like that is my favorite Xbox One game of the generation so far, for whatever that's worth.
Again.
But I would put that in my top 5 of the gen so far easily. I loved Sunset Overdrive.
I don't know if I go that far,
but it didn't help, did it? Like, no one cared.
I could have told him it was going to sell poorly.
Yeah, I kind of thought so too. I don't know necessarily why. Probably because you look at it and you can't get how good it is from just sort of seeing it. And
just the look of it, just the whole like dude bro angle it had, like,
which isn't really in the actual game itself. It's
how they marketed it.
It's like the marketing kind of made it out to be something else. Because I remember,
Shaka bra, like,
because I remember playing it early for review stuff, and I was not looking forward to it. I was just like, oh man, I don't want to deal with it. But I loved every second of it. And I was like, like after like 10 minutes, I'm like, this is not the game that those previews show. This is not. Yeah. There's no like douche bro walking through like making fun of Call of Duty and like jumping, being too super extreme and stuff. Like, it was very self-aware, very funny, and once you got the air dash, it played like a dream. Like, it was great.
All right, we got to move on. I think we spent too much time on it. Again, this is coming from a place of love. I love Insomniac. Ted, if you're watching this, love you guys, but just got to call it how I see it. So, all right, let's move on. We're going to talk.
Let's send Overdrive on PC.
Yeah, probably a smart move.
Yeah.
Easy to port. Get a little more money out of that project.
Oh, I might upgrade to Windows 10 for that.
All right, next we're going to talk about what everyone is, or a person everyone is pretty much calling a jerk this week. He's probably public enemy number 1 in the gaming industry this week. His name is Alex St. John. He is one of the co-creators of DirectX, which is no small feat, I might add.
Well, until he burned out and got fired.
Right.
For being put through exactly what he criticized people for complaining about this week.
Yeah, so this week, this guy is a veteran game developer. Again, he helped co-create DirectX. That's a big freaking deal. And this week he came out and he started a studio. What was this? Wild Tangent? Is
Wild
that the name
Tangent.
of the studio?
You may know it from thousands and thousands of adware and malware games that have ended up on your PC over the years.
Yeah. So he's been in the industry a long time.
Oh, yeah.
And he's been plugging along with his little studio. It's never really had like a huge smash hit, but they keep putting out games and they're still around.
I think he sold Wild Tangent a few years ago.
Oh, he did?
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of that. So he comes out and he writes this piece. Was it for VentureBeat? I believe it was.
Sure.
I think it was VentureBeat. So he wrote an op-ed, basically, talking about how video game developers need to stop crying. I mean, like, I'm totally paraphrasing here. They need to stop crying about 80-hour work weeks and crunch and suck it up and love it, because if
realize they're lucky to have a job at all.
Yeah, and because if they're not willing to do it, there's 100 people standing in line behind them waiting to do it. Matt, how do you feel about this?
Well, anything I can say is going to be redundant if you just watch the Jimquisition this week, because he summed that one up very well. But it's incredibly stupid. It's one of the most like weird, self-absorbed, unrealistic like things I've ever seen on in terms of like commentary on the industry. Because like, look, like people are people. Like and the idea that you're supposed to like grind these men and women, actually probably just men, because he doesn't seem to think women can code. You're supposed to grind these people so hard they work 80 hours and thank you for the privilege. Like, you're not going to get good work out of people that are exhausted like that. And the man himself, like Alex St. John himself, like burned himself out working on the DirectX project, and eventually Microsoft fired him, like because he was useless to them at that point. So like I don't know where. I guess he had enough Microsoft stock after that he was plenty well off, but like. I don't know how he goes through that and comes out the other end thinking that everyone should kill themselves on a sacrificial platform for him, regardless. And like he makes fun of people for wanting to have like a work-life balance, and claims that someone who wants to get paid for their work is suffering from a wage slave attitude. And I'm like, where do you think people are going to buy their food so they don't die if you don't pay them properly? And I just don't, and so far, you look back at Wild Tangent and, what the company he ran, I'm like, I don't see a lot of product coming out of that company that makes me think that it justifies that kind of philosophy.
I'm curious, too, if his developers are crunching. Does he crunch his developers?
It sounds like they crunch all the time, if by his philosophy. I mean, there was a Facebook post from him, which may have been like a joke or something, but I don't know, I can't tell. This guy is so close to self-parody that like reading his stuff is like reading something written by the boss from Dilbert. Like it's crazy, and it's a photo and an email from like internal at Wild Tangent, I guess, where it says like, hey, some of you people are like getting sick and like disappearing for days because you got sick, and so I just want to show you this. If you like, first off, he says like if you happen to fall like deathly ill through like. And he says, I don't remember the phrasing, but it's like through like your own weakness of spirit. Like basically, like if you get like horribly ill, it's your own fault for like being weak. And he says, remember, here's an example of one of the other employees, and it's this guy in a hospital bed with a laptop and like a breathing mask, and he's like, he went in for his appendectomy and got no anesthetic, was not put out for the operation, so he could continue to be on his phone and his laptop, so he wouldn't be out of communication all day. And I'm like, are you kidding? Is that real? Like, and then the guy who it was, I guess, said it was a real thing. The Facebook post does exist from like 2008 or 2009. But my point is, that's crazy.
Yeah. But see, here's the thing, Matt, is like, and I'm not taking this guy's side, don't get me wrong, but I do play devil's advocate sometime on the show, and I'm going to do that a little bit here, is sometimes you have to protect people from themselves, because people who are good at making games generally are obsessed with making games, and they want to work the crazy hours. And look, I can speak for myself. I've been crunching on Sifted for like 18 months now. Like if you're talking about like dedicating that many hours per week or whatever to something that you're working on, like I've been doing it for like 18 months. And like it'll kill you. It's killing me. Like I've put on like 20 pounds since I started working on Sifted. Like that's the bottom line. Like all I do is sit in front of a computer and type. And for me, it's my wife who is the cop. She's the one who's like, yo, bro, like, you've got no life right now. Like, we haven't gone out and done X, Y, and Z in like 3 months. We haven't gone and done this in forever. Like, you're locked working like all the time. I feel like if I get time from you, it's like you're making an exception for it. Like, you need somebody to be there to kind of tell you that you need to dial it back. Because otherwise, if you're really into something, you're just going to do it, and you're going to do it for the amount of time. So in some ways, I kind of see his point in that if you want to be a good developer, like that's kind of how it works. Like you work crazy hours for a few months when you finish up your project. Now, there's no excuse at all for someone doing this at a studio like around the clock. And the other part of it too is that like,
which is what he's talking about. He's talking about like you should expect to work 80 hours a week
Right,
if
always.
you're a software developer, a software programmer, period.
which is completely
And
insane.
claims that it's impossible to get tired or burnt out by, quote, pushing a mouse around. That making video games isn't real work. That kind of thing. And also, and the other, of course, the other big difference between someone who's doing that at like a major, company and say what you're doing with Sifted is that if Sifted does well, takes off, explodes, does something, you directly reap the benefits of
Exactly,
that.
yeah.
Whereas
That's a
some
big
guy
difference.
who's a code monkey at Microsoft doesn't get anything out of that. Although it probably benefits his bosses to get some bonuses from
they'll
that.
get bonus, they'll get a raise or whatever. But yeah, it's way different. Owning your own company
Right.
versus working for somebody else.
But like, yeah, I mean, I certainly, sure, we even in TV, you're talking about 12, 14, 15, 16-hour days sometimes.
Yeah.
But you have to balance that. Like, you have to, maybe you're going to work 18 hours that day, that big shoot day, or that big, in crunch. That's the equivalent of crunch in production.
Yeah.
Video production basically. But like that doesn't mean you keep everyone there that same amount of hours in pre-production or in
Right.
post. Like you don't do. I mean, and that's that's what overtime is there to protect you against. Is like usually the idea being you're not going to want to pay these employees time and a half or double time, and you'd rather just let them go home and have lives. But sometimes it doesn't apply, and like this guy doesn't seem to think it applies. I don't know what his philosophy necessarily is on paying these people what they're legally required to be paid. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe
I
he
think
does.
it depends on what state they're in.
Right. I don't know what Washington's rules on that are. But at a certain point, you think it'd be cheaper just to hire double the number of people.
Yeah, instead of paying the
Instead
overtime.
of paying
But see-
everybody,
But then you have to find people who are as good as the people.
Yeah. Well, and then if you read his explanations of how to find good people, those are almost as offensive as any. He's talking about seek out people with Asperger's syndrome because they're crazy and they don't pass interviews, so all the good people aren't taken up yet. So you can basically he actually uses the word kidnap.
I know.
It's crazy.
He is nuts. There's no doubt about it.
And I don't think a whole lot of people are taking this guy. This is he writes like a supervillain.
He does.
It's no. There are companies.
I wonder how much of this too is just him trying to maybe drum up interest in his studio or.
Well, I think he does some kind of consulting thing for. It sounds like he's one of those guys that does seminars on how to be an effective leader of a company or whatever, and he's got all these
Imagine
crazy
if he was
slides.
your boss.
Oh man, I can't.
I wonder how many people working at his studio right now are trying to get the hell out of there
I don't know.
after seeing his perspective on them, basically.
Oh, the instant I got a whiff of any of that, I'd be the end of that.
Oh, I
Forget
know.
it. But he also treats it as if you don't like it, then just get out and get another job. And it's just not that simple, especially now, especially in this job market right now for any tech thing.
It's tough.
Finding another job is very hard for anybody. And the idea that it's that's what he means. There's 100 people waiting to take your place. But just because there's 100 people waiting to take your place doesn't mean you should give up your humanity or your life. You still got to live. You still got to,
Hard to live if you're not making money.
Yeah, but you still got to be sane. Being crazy and burnt out and you don't even know where you are is no way to live either.
Yeah. No, you're right.
And that's gonna and he constantly talks about the wife or the girlfriend being the thing that holds the coder back, the
That's what
programmer
I was
back.
talking about. My wife does that to me, yeah.
Because they want them to remain human. They
Yeah.
want them to remember that there's other things outside of work, and that's it's that classic work to live mentality.
Yeah.
Which is unhealthy.
It is unhealthy. Without a
And
doubt.
I'm certainly, we've been together on some of those war zones where we had to work ridiculous hours and get all that stuff done but we were working towards an end goal.
Yeah.
We had a project to finish. We had a
Well,
show to do.
developers are doing that too. They're finishing their game.
But that's
or
not
whatever.
what this guy's talking about. He's talking about this is just how it should work. He's not talking about you need to work a few 80-hour weeks at the end of a project. We'll just suck it up and do it. It's look, that sucks, and you shouldn't have to end up in that situation. But I have ended up in that situation, and indeed sucked it up and did it. And that's just how it is. That's part of being in an industry that you love doing. But at the same time, if you're talking about that's just how it should always work, and there are rumors about some developers that are like that it's just crunch time 52 weeks a year.
Yeah.
That's wrong.
Let me ask you a question, Matt. What do you think is the better situation? Having your employees engaged on that level on a project where they're working 80 hours a week and they're completely obsessed with it, or having somebody instead who works 40 hours a week and is only maybe moderately engaged in the project?
Well, it depends what good means, I guess. I think it's better for maybe for the product to have people who are invested and interested. But I think that's kind of a false metric where like you don't need to have them working that much. Especially if they're a passionate group of people is going to get stuff done on a more timely basis from my experience. Like if as long as you're not wasting time, if you've got people that really care about what the end product is, you're going to end up with people that get their stuff done in a timely and efficient manner. That's certainly how my experience has been when it comes to production. It's like sometimes you're like, oh well, if things were like, oh well, you guys are leaving already, like how it's like, well yeah, we did the next 2 days worth of work because we're so fired up, we got this much done. And like I think that's a much healthier situation. So my solution to that would be like, yeah, I'd rather not have the 40-hour-a-week guy who doesn't really care about the situation or the product, but I would just get rid of him and go find someone who's passionate, who doesn't like demand to work 80 hours a week. I don't think it's not hard to get people to not work 80 hours a week. I think.
Well, no, definitely not. But don't you think the guy who works the 80 hours a week and hasn't quit is probably really down on the project and is probably like one of your better employees?
No, I think he might be that, but he also might be someone who's terrified to not have a job. He might be someone who's terrified to buck the trend and say that like I need time to myself, but he's afraid he'll get replaced by some other, because believe me, those employees know that there's 100 people waiting for their position too.
Yeah.
Like you can't really tell, especially if you're in a position of power, you can't really tell if that person is breaking their back because they believe in the thing, or if they're afraid that they're going to starve and be on the street.
Or if they're just slow.
That too. Yeah, I mean.
Because that's what I found.
I've had days like that too.
Yeah, I mean, but yeah, I found that too. Like, as a manager of people, like everybody's different. Like some people are amazing. Like they just work crazy hours and they're crazy productive. Some people work crazy hours because if they only work 8 hours, they can't get the work done that they need to get it done. And so they just have to spend the extra hours because they don't work as fast and aren't as productive in the amount of time that they're at work.
There were some times when, because sometimes you have that culture where it's like, well, if you're not in by this time, it's like that's not okay. But I work much better, in a quieter, more like kind of evening setting. If I'm working on my own from home, I do most of my work at night.
Yeah.
So there were times when I would, kind of do what kind of watchdog the area, in a corporate environment or an office environment. And after everybody went home around 5 p.m., that's when I get all my stuff done. Because it was just easier for me to work really fast and hard at that point, and as long as there wasn't anything else anybody else needed during that day, I would do like tomorrow's work then, basically.
Do game developers need a union at this point? I really feel like they need one.
I think probably so.
Yeah.
I think it's
Why has nobody stood up and done this yet? Like the IGDA kind of acts as like the game developers like union rep. Like,
but no one cares.
They don't do anything.
No.
The IGDA is just talks. They don't actually do anything. Like, and no one, it doesn't really seem like anyone really cares what they talk about either. Like, I feel like for things to get to a place where all these talented people have a balance of the real life and their jobs, a union's probably going to have to get involved.
Mm-hmm. At the very least, so, okay, maybe you still have to do some of this crazy crunch time stuff, but you're going to have to pay these people for it. Like, that's probably the way you solve the crunch problem, is you make it a financial penalty to the company to have to do that, and they will figure it out, so they don't have to pay that money.
But see, what the company does is that they just put everybody on salary.
Right.
Instead of making them hourly. Mm-hmm. And that's how you get around it. It's how,
But then that's like, that's not how unions work.
Yeah, I mean, that's how Viacom managed to make GT a success, and we were competing with GameSpot and IGN with like 6 guys. Like, our editorial team was 6. Their editorial team was like 50. But we were like nipping at their heels, and that's because all my guys were on salary. They all loved their jobs. I didn't never tell them like how many hours to work, but they worked 78 or 80 hours a week.
Well, that's part of the issue is like, and I remember when we would do stuff for X-Play, and it was like irritating as hell for us. Those of us who were salaried, like we'd have all, some of these shoots would go super long, especially some of the more ambitious episodes or like the E3 stuff, and like, the hourly employees had to go home at like this certain time, or we would have to pay them overtime, and like, we would lose half of our workforce.
Well, you start to figure out after a while, and if you're in a situation where you have a foot in the door job and you're working those kinds of hours, like say like an entry-level programmer or a QA guy, you start to realize that you'd probably make more money if you just worked those same hours at like McDonald's.
Yeah.
Like when I first moved to San Francisco back in like 1999 or whatever, like I was making $35K a year in the Bay Area, and I was working, I don't even want to know how many hours, like probably 100 hours a week. Because I got in there and I wanted to prove myself, and I wanted to be a success. I didn't want to have to leave California. I wanted to stay in games. And it's the same thing that these developers are doing. They're like, I want to make games. And I mean, that's the other angle of it is, watching some of the B-roll that we put up while we've been talking about this, like, a lot of what we were showing were, like, the glamorous jobs. Like, the guys who do the mocap and, like, the guy who, like, designs the game. Like, you don't see, like, the grunts. Like, the people who sit there and just pound out code all day, every day. And the only time somebody talks to them is when there's something wrong. Like, those people
who generally do not benefit from whether that game is a hit or not.
And I mean, the one thing that you might contend is that if someone is willing to do that, where they're going to sit there and work all that time, where they could make more money working at a fast food restaurant for the hours that they're working, they probably love it. Like,
it's true, but again, that's not really the issue I think people are taking with Alex St. John's opinions on that. The problem is that he's painting workers as inhuman. Like, he's treating them like machines. Like, even in companies where you work very long hours because you believe in the project, usually that company also shows some appreciation to you for doing that. And he seems to think this is just baseline expectations.
I don't know about that, Matt. I honestly don't know that I believe that
What?
the companies appreciate it. I don't. I think that most companies just look at their employees as machines and numbers. And employee B29XV can get X amount of work done in Y amount of hours.
I think it depends company to company. But at the same, you think Insomniac's like that?
Probably not, but they're not really a corporation. They're a privately held company.
Right, but there's a ton of privately held development companies in the industry. I mean, when it comes down to it, there's only a few big corporate game developers.
Yeah.
Publishers, that's one thing. But like, you're talking about big corporate
But I mean,
game
let's
developers.
be honest. Who are you really working for?
Yeah, but
You're really working for the publisher.
Somewhat, but I mean, that doesn't necessarily impact your corporate culture or your company culture on that level. I mean, it's not the same thing as like, working for Insomniac, who is making a game for Oculus, is probably not the same as working directly for Oculus or working directly for Ubisoft as one of their. I mean, those guys, I think, probably read that Alex St. John's piece and were just like, yep. I think there's a lot more recognition maybe of that attitude in a large multinational than something like that.
I think the other thing you see with stories like this is that people are going to be quick to jump in and condemn the person, but you're never going to see the people who agree with him coming out and saying, oh, I agree with him. And truth be told, I think there's probably a lot of executives in the industry that read what he wrote and was like,
I think there's a
the
whole
shoe
lot.
fits.
Look, I mean, once you're up in that upper echelon, that like kind of
Completely out of touch.
the out of touch rich executive situation, it's very easy to see the people doing because all you want is the product. All you want is your bottom line, and you don't care what these people have to do to get it done because you don't have to worry about it. You want your thing done to deal with the client or deal with to deal with the customers and like whatever. Whereas it's very easy to forget what it's like to be in that trench. And I think that kind of rhetoric is going to get worse and worse as you start to see people in those positions react more and more virulently to the millennial generation, which he calls out a lot, tremendously. And believe me, that's not the first time I've heard that, even from very reasonable people.
Exactly.
That the millennials are very hard to motivate, and it's kind of ridiculous to generalize that because yes, I've worked with millennial people that you literally had to cheerlead to get them to do their job on a daily basis. And I've worked with millennial people that you couldn't get to go home after 14 hours because they were so obsessed with getting it right and doing doing the job.
And truth be told,
it's just because everybody's different, like you say. But it's very easy to kind of run into 3 or 4 bad apples in that regard and be like, oh, well, we need to impress upon this whole generation that you have to work like a slave until 80 hours is up, and even then you might need to still do some overtime and da-da-da. When in reality is like, every generation has lazy people. Every generation has super hardworking people and everything in between. So it's not some kind of weird millennial unique thing because, we had similar problems even going back 10, 15 years.
I think the one thing I would say about some of the younger generations is they think that success comes easier than it really does. Like, I would agree with you. I think that the percentage of that age group that works hard versus the percentage that doesn't work hard is pretty much the same across every other generation.
I would guess so.
But I would also say that the part of that generation that works really hard expects to be rewarded for their work much earlier.
Much quicker.
Oh, yeah.
When you come out of a generation that sees like the success, like you see of like the YouTube stars, and
or people who start tech companies and go from an idea to like a billionaire.
Zuckerberg and those guys. It's like I had an idea in my dorm room and now I'm a multi-billionaire. Like
Yeah.
But again, that's one man out of millions.
But that's what I found is that like you had to be really cautious about when you would pat them on the back, because as soon as you would tell them that they did a good job, their first thing was, what do I get for that? What's my reward for that? And it's like, well, your reward was me telling you did a great job, and we'll talk about it at your annual review this year. And
my reaction to that was always like, oh, good, I'm on the right track.
Yeah, but
like I didn't.
What I found is that a lot of their reaction is, okay, now what do I get? And but otherwise, I think the whole millennial thing is completely overblown and overstated. And look, perspectives change over time. It's like you said, like they've watched their whole lives. These people come up with a good idea, and just like that,
which we didn't really have.
No,
that
like,
was not the
very
culture.
Few and far between.
Yeah.
Like, and usually it was it was like it was not quick either.
Yeah.
It was like you had like
think of when we were
a friend who had a rich dad,
right? Or like when we were
growing up, but it didn't happen
up,
overnight. It's like his dad started at like a mill where he milled wood. And then he like...
Well, when we grew up,
he started his own mill.
The phrase get-rich-quick scheme was a pejorative.
Yeah, yeah.
It was something you made fun of someone for doing.
Yeah, yeah.
But now it's like...
That could happen.
Yeah. So, and then you see things like, what was that guy from Smite that like made fun of like mentally disabled people and like...
Well, he didn't do that.
Yeah. Oh, no, it was suicidal. It was suicide.
Yeah.
He like went on this crazy rant. I was like, where... Like, at what point do you detach from reality to the point that you think that's going to go over well? It's like...
Well, I think he just was going to quit his job. I don't think he thought he was going to keep his job after that. I think he would probably gotten sick of his job and was like, I'm tired of dealing with this crap. I'm going to vent, and then I know I'm out.
There are ways to do that won't make it quite so hard to get the next job.
Yeah, because he's pretty screwed. So those of you who don't know, there was a guy who worked for Hi-Rez Studios who would live stream Smite for them. And one of his regular viewers came on his stream and said in the comments that he had contemplated committing suicide, and he decided against it because he enjoyed being a part of this guy's stream so much. Well, instead of the guy saying, oh, like I'm really flattered that, the stream is so important to you, he went the whole other way and was like, if you are relying on me to keep you from killing yourself, you've got like no crap, he has major problems. He's thinking about killing himself. Like, so bad on so many levels. That was actually like a borderline topic for today's show, but I decided to...
There's not a whole lot of meat there because there's no other side.
There's just one side. Yeah. You're an insensitive jerk.
Yeah.
And a discussion. That's pretty much it. Yeah, so... Well, we should probably move on from this topic as well. Yeah. Obviously, Matt and I both think this guy's a total douchebag. I hope.
And we're not against hard work at all.
No, obviously
we've
not.
done that. We've done that our whole lives. But like, I have never felt like I was being exploited for that. And I think what he's describing is exploitation.
Yeah, yeah. And I just kind of have to be devil's advocate every once in a while to kind of inspire discussion. I totally think the guy's an
well, it's not like I didn't do devil's advocate for Insomniac.
Yeah, yeah. That's just how it works.
That's how we roll.
People. All right, so let's move on to the next topic.
We don't have a devil's advocate position for the suicide guy. That's the problem.
Yeah, exactly. There's no position to take on that one. All right, so we're going to talk briefly about Star Fox Zero. We talked about it on last week's show for a good while. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it, but the embargo is up. In fact, the game eval, I was just doing the last revision of it when I had to leave to come and record the show. It's almost done. It'll be up as soon as I get back tonight and get the show going. It'll be up very soon, but the embargo is up, so I can talk about whatever now. The reviews for it have come out today. I'm actually surprised at
Better
how
than I thought.
high they are. IGN's review.
Yeah, although...
I don't know what game they were playing. I hate to ever use that phrase, but in journalists do it all the time.
Sometimes it's the
I don't know if they were playing the same game
I don't know what
as
movie
me.
you watched, but... I think from what I read so far, I think Giant Bomb nailed it. They were very low, but like what they said rang very true to me in the sense of like, well, there's nothing really new here. It's very retro. It's very throwback, and that's okay. But like, it feels like maybe it would have been time for a Star Fox game that really moves into the modern era.
Yeah.
And I thought about, the funny thing is I thought about that and I realized like, if this wasn't Star Fox, if it was just a game like this that wasn't Star Fox, this would be like a mid-level indie game.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like if this wasn't Nintendo making a new Star Fox, we'd be like, oh, that's a cool indie game.
I mean, I wouldn't say it's indie. I would just say...
But there are indie games, like Rebel
people-
Galaxy? Like Rebel Galaxy is not too far off this in terms of look and scope.
Yeah. I mean, I would... You haven't really played the whole thing. I wouldn't necessarily agree with that, but I would say that people would never guess that it was like a Nintendo-published game.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have that... Like I said last week, it doesn't have that special sauce that a lot of Nintendo games have. Then again, they didn't develop it. It's developed by Platinum, but usually Nintendo's pretty good at managing...
But that's happened before, and they've usually
pretty good at
whipped them
managing
into
those
shape.
projects. But yeah, I would agree that this game feels really old. Like, just the way the checkpoint system is set up at a lot of points in the game, like the last boss, like, it's so stupid. Like, so you have to fight this dogfight against... I don't want to spoil anything. You fight a dogfight that's... It's not even that hard. Like, the first time you play it, it's hard, then you figure it out. Like a lot of Nintendo games. Like, once you figure it out, it's really freaking easy. And so you fight this dogfight, but it takes a long time. No matter how good you are, the dogfight just takes a long time to win. So you win the dogfight, then you have to go through this whole other, like, maze section of the game. Literally, it's a maze. Like, you're flying your ship through a maze tunnel. And then you come and you fight the final boss. And that's all with 2 lives. And so I don't know if you remember Star Fox, but like how it works is like you collect gold rings. 3 gold rings, you get an extra life. And then the silver rings and gold rings give you health or whatever. But essentially, you have to go through 3 levels with 2 lives, not accounting for the ones that you build as you find gold rings. And there aren't many. They're very smart or dumb, depending on your perspective, about how many gold rings they offer you, because they don't want you just farming for the gold rings, so to speak, and building up your lives. So I think the most I've ever had, most I've accumulated during this 3-level section is like 4. So you have to go through like 3 levels to basically, well, with 4 men. In this game, that's insane. Like, you could die, like, at any moment from a million different... It's the final boss in the game.
Right.
Where literally, like, 2 hits of the boss kills you. So, you, to get depleted of guys, you have to go all the way back to that dogfight again and fight the dogfight. And then do the tunnel maze, which is so stupid because it's the same every time. And then fight the last boss. Like, it's... And the game is full of stuff like this, where you're just like, what? Like, who thought of this and thought this was a good idea? Like,
Shane, that's just old school challenge.
no, it's not. And the challenge in the game in general is just all over the place. Like, the beginning of the game is really easy. And then, like, you'll hit, like, a level where you're like, well, I just tried that 15 times in a row. And, like, eventually you get to the point where in some of the levels, you don't actually play the levels anymore. You're just trying to get to the end. So you, like, fly around everything and around obstacles and, like... And it uses the old, like, laser upgrade system. I don't know if you remember that, how they have the laser icons. That's the key to the whole game, is making sure your laser's powered up. Because if you fight a boss with a base laser, it'll take you, like, an hour to chip him down to nothing. If you have, like, the second laser level for your ship, like, he goes down in, like, 5 seconds. So the game becomes this thing of, like... I'm going to avoid all the enemies. I'm going to memorize where all the laser upgrades are and swoop in and pick up the laser upgrades, avoid everybody else to get... Because all the boss fights are like that. Like, they give you this little gauntlet before you fight the boss. If you die, you have to do it again. Like, it's never just like, you respawn and there's the boss, fight him. Like, just all kinds of weird, goofy stuff in this game. And, like, all the walker levels are complete throwaways and garbage. Never should have been included. There's, like, this hovercraft, complete garbage and stupid. And then remember how last week you saw that one little thing where, like, the little robot comes down and he, like, goes up to a panel and hacks? That is used, like, through the whole game. Literally, through, like, the whole game. Like, against bosses. Like, you'll fight a boss... And you'll have to, like, fly your little ship and drop this little robot down on, like, a moving boss. Like, it is infuriating.
Fox Souls.
It is not a good game, Sifters. That's all I can say. You'll see my eval soon enough, but it is not a good game. I'll tell you that right now. But the other thing we wanted to talk about today is something that I have never, ever seen in all my years working in games journalism.
This is a new one.
And so today...
Actually, I remember one other.
Okay, I'll be interested to hear what that is, because I don't remember it ever happening. Today, Polygon posted its review of Star Fox Zero, where the editor refused to finish the game and refused to review the game.
Even though he pretty much reviewed the
Even
game.
though the article
is basically a review with no score.
Right. But said he never finished it.
Right. And he said he refused to finish it.
Yes.
It was the strangest damn thing I've ever seen. Like
I have never, ever seen this before. Ever. And for them to publish it, like, if I had assigned this game to a freelance writer, and a couple days before it was supposed to come in, he emails me or she emails me and says, hey, I don't want to play this game anymore. Like, I just don't want to. I am disliking it and not enjoying it so much that I cannot bring myself to play it any further, which is just crazy. It's a freaking video game. It's not like you're digging a ditch. Like, I would tell them, okay, well, you're not getting paid, 1. 2, I'll assign it to somebody else.
Right.
I don't say to them, okay, well,
why don't you write about that?
Just write a game
go with
eval, but don't give it a score, and make sure you mention in there that you don't want to play the game anymore and you never finished it. I have never...
I finished Ogre Battle 64 for review. I got no sympathy for anyone who can't finish a 3-hour Star Fox game.
You finished The Witcher for us. I mean, you reviewed The Witcher 3 for us. Like, that's a 200-hour game. Like, this Star Fox, by the way, is about a 6 or 7 hour game. And that's if you actually go back and, like, play stuff. Because I don't recommend it, by the way. Like, that's the one thing I found about Star Fox Zero that's different from Star Fox 64 is my motivation to replay it is, like, 0. Because you can't just go back and pick and choose the level. It's just like Star Fox 64.
You have to play through the whole
You have to play through the whole string. And after you finish the game, those extra levels do come open and unlock. So there's a little bit of incentive to go back and play some maps that you didn't get to see on your first playthrough, but you have to go through the walker levels to get to them. And I'm just like, no freaking way, Jose. But it is like the first time through, and look, I will say, it doesn't sound like this editor got there, but I will say the end boss in this game really sucks. Like, having to go through a 3-level thing to, like, fight the... That's just insane. But he never
you did it.
I did it. He never even got there. And he quit already. Or she. I don't even know who it was. Like...
It was Arthur.
Arthur Gies.
Yeah.
That blows me away. He's a reviews editor.
Yeah, he's the reviews editor for Polygon.
Wow.
I don't get it. I did excuse myself from a review once. It was Demon's Souls. I took it home for, I think, 1 night or 2 nights, and I came back, and I'm like, this game is not for me.
Yeah.
Like, I am not going to give this a fair shake in the review. I'm just not, I don't get it. Like, I'm not... So, but that was like, we had like 3 weeks to deadline. You know, it was like, give it to somebody else. Like, it wasn't like we're not going to even finish it. We're not going to review this. We're just going to...
Well, it wasn't like you put your fist down and you're like, no, I am reviewing this, and I'm going to rail this game because I don't want to play it anymore.
Right.
Like,
I said, just give it to somebody else, and they gave it to somebody else.
And somebody else who probably thought it was okay.
Yeah, but I knew I couldn't give it a fair evaluation because I didn't get it. Wasn't working in my brain, and it took 2 more games for Dark Souls to really click with me.
Yeah.
But I knew that, and I backed away from it. And like, but other than that, I've played some bad games.
Oh
for review,
my gosh! I don't even want to tell you
all of them.
I still play bad games.
It's
for Sifted.
It took me years to realize that some people don't, like these reviewers, a lot of times don't really fully finish the games.
Really?
Oh yeah, I didn't even realize that.
No.
Yeah.
Like who?
Because we used to get like memory cards with like, you know, give us your save for like.
I mean the freelancers.
Freelancers and
yeah,
stuff.
every once in a while, but we could usually ferret that out even without getting their saves. Like we could just tell by how they wrote their reviews, and generally we'd let them go and they wouldn't review for us anymore.
Right. But like sometimes you really did run into stuff where I'm like, okay, well, because like a lot of the games like RPGs I'd play too, and I'm like, oh, I'm playing it, but I want to save from the reviewer so it's further along, so I get better capture and like, you know, more variety and stuff. And you would get the save from the reviewer, and it'd be like 40 hours behind me. You know, I'm like, what the fuck is this?
Oh, back in the day, there was a couple guys who wrote for some of the magazines like Maxim and stuff like that, who wrote reviews before they ever played the game.
Wasn't like an
I'm
Angel...
not going to name anybody. I know exactly who it was.
I think I remember a couple of those reviews.
Yeah. I mean, there's been some dirty stuff that's happened, but this is Polygon. This isn't like some like 25-word blurb review for Maxim. Like,
well, it's not like a 48, 60, 80-hour game. It's like
7 hours.
I'm not saying you got to go through every single permutation of the map or anything, but like get to the end of it. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what to say.
I don't know. The only other time I've seen anything like this was I think it was Justin McElroy, and it was before Polygon. It wasn't, but it was.
Because he writes for Polygon, doesn't he?
Yeah, but it was whatever it was before that. I don't remember where he was, but it was Nier, and he was like, I couldn't get past this part. Like I couldn't figure out. It was a fishing thing, like the fishing tutorial.
Yeah.
I can't
Everybody got screwed by that.
That was, and like I couldn't figure out what to do, and like so I guess I can't finish the game, and I'm not going to review it because I don't understand what it wants me to do. It's broken or whatever. And of course, it turned out it was like he was fishing in the wrong spot.
Right.
And if you just follow the X, you go to the other spot. But again, Nier is also one of those games where it's like you play it and you're like, yeah, this game is oddly vague. You know, I love Nier, but like, there's a lot of points where I'm just like, man, what do you want, game? Like, what am I?
No, a lot of people got stuck on that fishing part. He wasn't the only one. But here's the irony of the whole thing, Matt.
But again, Nier is like a 70-hour game.
Right.
You know, like it's a bigger task.
Here's the irony of the whole thing, is that having said all that, and having played the game from start to finish and gone back and played through a good part of it again and playing challenge modes and all the training stuff and co-op and everything, his review is actually, in my opinion, closer to the truth than almost all the other reviews.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like you read that and you're just like, oh, this is crazy, unreasonable bullshit. It's like, no, it sounds pretty close to what everyone's saying.
No, I'm just saying that he's saying the game sucks.
And I don't want to play it anymore.
And the game is closer to sucking than it is to a lot of the other reviews that we curated on Sifted today. That's what I'm telling you. Like, so his methods are unorthodox.
But it's not like he reached the wrong conclusion.
Exactly. But
I mean, if you didn't feel the compulsion to finish it for your job, would you have finished Star Fox Zero?
I would have quit on the final boss fight. Yeah. I would have played it up until that point, but after I had died like the first, like... I mean, I got so good at that end sequence that I could get all the way to the boss without ever really even getting hit. Mm-hmm. And I could actually fight that boss. Like, it took me a long time to figure it. It was like, it's Nintendo. Like, the final boss, like, you get him to a stagger state without trying to spoil anything. And for the longest time, I just could not figure out what I was supposed to do when he was in the stagger state. I tried everything. And the problem is once he gets into that stagger state and you go for it, whatever it may or may not be, if you fail, you die instantly. And so I could get through all that gauntlet, get to that boss, chip that boss all the way down to nothing until he gets to that stagger state, and then just die over and over and over again. Just trying to figure out what the quote-unquote trick was to finish off the boss.
And that stuff is worse when you're trying to review something because usually it's not out yet, so you have no way to find out what happened, how to do it.
Nope. I had to figure it out on my own. And I finally did, but by the time I would have quit. Like, if I was just playing that game for fun, and, I mean, people will have guides that they'll laugh people watching this will laugh when they play it because they'll know what to do. Mm-hmm. But when you have nobody to talk to and you're trying to figure it out on your own, I wanted to quit.
I had a couple
I wanted to quit playing the game.
I had a few moments like that.
So I can sympathize with Arthur Gies a little bit. Like, I wanted to quit, but I didn't because it's my job. Like, the people who read my game eval need to know that I played the whole damn game. Like, and, he's lucky that he's right. Like, the game isn't good. Like, it doesn't magically get much better. Actually, it does get better, though, later on, because early in the game, you're forced to play those walker levels and that stupid-ass hover plane. The last half of the game, it's almost all Landmaster Tank and Arwing. And so it does actually get better. It gets harder, but it gets better in the second half. He's just lucky that it so worked out that his ending opinion ended up being pretty accurate with the overall product. So I've never seen anything like this, ever. I've never seen a journalist just be like, I quit. Like, it's crazy.
I don't get it. There were points during my review of Dark Souls 2 for Rev 3 where I was like, I don't know if I can do this. Like, I don't know if I'm gonna make it.
And
like,
when you're on a deadline,
and you're on a deadline. Like, I mean, again, this was like 2 weeks before the game even came out. Like, there was things where I'm like, I don't know where to go. I'm out of places to go, and like, after
and I've tried every item on every object in the game, and
after wandering around for like another 2 hours, I found like the little path that I missed like the first 14 times I walked past it. I was like, oh, there's a whole new place. Okay. And
that feeling that you get when you discover it, you're like, thank God.
And that wasn't even like, oh, this is too hard for me. It's like, I don't know what to do. And
because if you're assigned a game by like an editor and you don't work there, you're a freelancer or whatever. Like the last thing you want to do is call them or email them and be like, I'm going to miss deadline.
Right.
That's the last thing as a freelancer you ever want to do is miss deadline.
Well, I think it actually ended up like I dug up a couple other people I know who were reviewing it. I'm like, can we start like an email thread or something? Like, we had like a 500 email chain of like 6 people or something that were just like it was just like we could have written a strategy guide for the game out of that email chain. It was crazy. So like everybody got each other through it, but like that was the hardest like kind of like slog of a review I've ever done, probably, at least in recent memory. I'm sure like I didn't enjoy playing the G.I. Joe movie game either, but it was like that was so mindless. It never, I don't remember doing it really.
Yeah.
Dark Souls 2, I remember just like, I don't know if I can make it. I don't know if I'm going to get to the end of this game before I got to write this thing. And the worst thing was like I was like capturing footage because they wanted like footage for it. And so I'm like, they'll know if the footage isn't past a certain point. I didn't get past that point. So like,
you have a conscience. That's what it is.
Well, yeah. I mean, I identify with the desire to just, I don't want my day. I identify with the feeling of like getting up in the morning and be like, oh, I gotta play that thing today. But it's like there's worse jobs to have.
I mean, I've done really awful jobs in my life.
Like fucking, suck it up and play the video game you're getting paid to play.
Yeah. All I ever have to do when I start feeling like that is I just remember a job that I had where I worked in a mill that made carpet for automobiles, and it was 115 degrees. I don't want to talk about this too long because we need to move on. But literally, basically what they did is they dyed the carpet at this place in these vats that were the size of like 18-wheeler trucks that had 300-degree water in them and dye.
Jeez. And
there was just dozens of them. And it was literally 115 in there with they had air conditioning in the building. It was still 115 and like 300% humidity. So I just always think back to that. I'm like, nothing will ever be as bad as that job.
Unless we go back there and make you play Star Fox Zero in it.
All right, we got to move on to the next topic. We're getting at the 2-hour mark already, and we have 2 topics to go.
I know you're full of it when you say we're going to go 3 hours on this one.
It's happened again.
We love hearing ourselves talk.
Yeah. So Ubisoft this week, a big gaffe. At least in my opinion, it was a big gaffe. So the late game in The Division has turned out to be pretty much a disaster and a mess. Like, people are into it. Like, the loot drops are great, and people are motivated to keep playing, but it is just a litany of bugs and issues with it. Typically, when developers have issues with their code, or publishers have issues with their code, they're very apologetic, and they put out a press release saying, we're working as hard as we can, we're working around the clock, we're in on the weekend, we're working 80-hour weeks to fix it. But not Ubisoft. So basically what happened is there's been a couple huge exploits that have been found. So one of them...
Pretty much the only use for that portable cover thing.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk about that one second. The one that we're showing right now is basically an exploit that turns your weapons into just world destroyers. So basically you can if you have a certain perk enabled and you swap weapons really quickly, as you swap the weapons, you see them doing it right there, it boosts the power of your weapon until you can take out the toughest enemies in the game with, one shot.
Wow.
Literally. The most difficult boss in the game you can drop with, one shot. And so they found that one. Now, the second one, if you'll flip the footage, this one is the one that you were talking about. So... incursions are essentially raids. They're the closest thing that they have to raids in The Division. And so this glitch / exploit, basically you just use a piece of portable cover while you're standing against a wall, and it will teleport you through that wall. And so,
which has been the core of tons of mission skips.
And there you can see he just did it right there. So, and what it does is when you teleport into that room, the game doesn't recognize that you're in the room. It thinks you're not there. So you can run around and people don't even act like you're there. They don't shoot at you. The boss doesn't shoot at you. There's like no way to die. The game doesn't recognize you as in the room. And so this is like the hardest boss in the whole game. And you can just walk up and just basically chip it down until it dies. And then get, obviously, huge loot, gear, rewards for it. So, obvious shoddy programming by Ubisoft and by the developers of the game.
Like, welcome to like massively multiplayer games.
Pretty much.
Like, that's what people do.
And look, people expect this of MMOs or just games in general. Like, a game that's this big and this involved and you have people online and all these factors, like, flying around, like, there's going to be a couple loopholes that need to be tied up in the code.
Yeah.
It's not a surprise. The problem is how Ubisoft reacted to it. Ubisoft initially was saying, oh, the people who use these exploits are going to be severely punished. Severely punished. They never even thought about the fact of what if somebody just stumbles upon this and just does it? And it just happens. Like...
Or what if they're in a game where someone else does it and like
right.
they don't, it's not. Well, it's like you've already been through this thing. You don't want to lose your progress, but somebody decided to do that.
And look,
now you're part of it.
There's some context for this too, because look, the loot cave from Destiny is kind of the same thing. It was an exploit.
Well, man, this Division is similar. That one guy, the one boss guy, who bullet farmer, bullet whatever, and you could run out and kill him and take the thing and run back to the safe house and run back out. As long as you didn't kill his whole group. He would keep respawning, you just do it forever.
Just keep getting the loot.
And there was other similar things where you could like use the portable cover to like kind of sneak your way into the back of the Russian embassy mission and like kill those guys over and over again and just get loot like that. And it's like they didn't ban any of those people, But it's like that's just how these MMO kind of games work. Is like you put a thing out, you didn't test it enough, people find all these crazy exploits, you patch it up until people can't do that anymore, and that's it. And there's people that benefit from it by exploiting these glitches early on, but you don't maybe you take the items away if your game is set up to do that, but you don't ban them.
No, you don't.
They didn't make
You're
the glitch.
punishing them for your mistakes.
If it's in the game, it's in the game.
Yeah,
as
it's
far as
fair
I'm
game.
concerned.
Yeah, that's the way I look at it too. Unless somebody's using wall hacks, if they're modding it to cheat, sure, go after them. Or if, stuff like with Street Fighter, where people are just dropping because the game doesn't count a drop as a loss. Totally fine with that. But when people are using the code that you supplied and not altering it in any way, how can you punish somebody for doing that? Bungie didn't punish people for using the loot cave. It eventually fixed it or changed it. Got rid of it, but it didn't punish people for it. And look, there is a version of a loot cave in this too. It wasn't a cave, obviously, but... There was an area where you could just sit there and keep shooting enemies.
But that's what those things are called now because of Destiny.
Right. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it?
Yeah.
So to me, man, Ubisoft dropping the ball, and let's be fair, they have kind of backtracked on it. So they came out at first and was like, "You're going to be severely punished. We're going to get you."
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
And
I'll tell you, I haven't been playing Division much, but if I'd known about that flip the weapon, I'd have done that in a hot second.
Oh yeah, man, I know. Well, see, the problem is that it works in PvP. So when you're in the dark zone. You can do this trick and just walk up to even the highest level other player and just bam, just kill them. And so the problem is that the people who are refusing to do it can't compete with the people who are doing it. So out of survival, they're doing it.
Everyone's doing it.
Yeah, they're like, if I don't do this, people just come up to me and take all my stuff. I had enough problem with the dark zone when people didn't have these weapons. People just walked up and killed me and took all my stuff. I was like, screw you, this sucks. So yeah, Ubisoft, it's hard to say that they've ever been consumer friendly, really, I guess.
Yeah, but
that's a new low.
That is not the way to go about it. It's like you suck up that you screwed it up and people got to do some unfair things for a while and you fix it and you move on.
Yeah,
and try to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Do you take the loot away?
If you can.
You do take the loot away.
I would.
Why? How do you know how they got the loot, though? Whether it was legitimately...
Well, that's exactly it. You have to be sure.
Yeah.
You know, like something, and that's usually in the case of like, you can do some weird thing and like, you know, so that one piece of loot you can get turns out to be like way more powerful than it should be. You know, I've seen things where it's like either that item is taken away or it's severely nerfed. You know, that happens anyway. I
think one of these things is fixed tomorrow, actually, or the 21st.
Like, you can't depend on anything you get that's amazing to be amazing 3 months from now. You know, that's just the nature of the beast. But I find it very hard to believe that they can keep track of who got what from where in this game.
I'm saying.
So I don't think they'll do anything like that.
You don't think they'll take the loot away?
I don't see how they could. I have a...
There's also like that Phoenix credits glitch where you can just roll up the Phoenix credits. Like, this game has a lot of issues, man. Like
clearly they didn't, like, you know, I mean, this is the end game. The end game is probably the last thing you test, and the thing right now, the end game is being, you know, play tested by a couple million people.
Yeah.
So, like, of course you're going to find stuff like this, but you can't, like, punish people for your inability to put out a solid product in that regard. Like, if it's there, players are going to take advantage of it.
No,
and if you can correct that by, like, you know, resetting the board, basically, including doing the glitches, I guess, like, you can go ahead and choose that. But, like, you're going to piss the people off that got, you know, and it's like, that's the thing. It's like, well, we don't care if we piss you off if you got this stuff for a glitch and then you lost it because you shouldn't have had it in the first place. But at the same time, it's like...
How do you know they shouldn't have had it, though? I mean...
Well, you either have really detailed tracking systems the way, like, Blizzard does, you know, like World of Warcraft can tell what you did any given second of the day, you know, at all. You know, they can track that shit, no problem. But I have a very hard time believing the Division has anything equivalent. I think it's just basically from how this thing operates, like, I don't, you know, the fact that, like, you could make a backpack that held too many things and sent, like, the game into, like, lockup, and I mean, that to me says that, like, you barely know whether this thing's gonna hold together tomorrow or not.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly. Yeah.
So I have a hard time believing they have a inventory loot tracking system that is detailed enough that they could tell who did that and punish them accordingly. Because if they did, they'd probably just do that instead of banning them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And to be fair, again, like, Ubisoft actually has not completely rescinded the fact that they're going to, like, ban people. Like, it said...
It would be a very, very bad move.
Yeah. At first they said they're going to punish everybody severely, and then, like, the same community manager came out and said, okay, that's not set in stone yet. But he didn't say it wasn't happening.
Right.
Like, it's still, like, a possibility.
Because they're probably still...
They're investigating.
I think internally they're still arguing with Ubisoft France.
Probably right.
I'll bet you anything the home office is like, shoot them all.
Yeah.
Like line them all up at execution style and like end their accounts. And everyone who lives in the reality world is like, that's a very bad idea. You know, like that would be my wild guess as to what's happening here is like, you know, the home office is saying like, kill them all. And they're like, kind of our most dedicated players probably don't want to do that.
Probably the people who are going to buy Watch Dogs 2.
Yeah, because somebody has to.
Yeah, it's like their $60 is worth more than them getting some weird ones and zeros in their account that they may or may not supposed to have.
And our season pass holders to a large degree, probably. You know, like, or potential season pass purchasers. You know, like these. You know, the people who've been sticking around to the end game enough to want to glitch through to like the high end gear are probably not the people you want to screw with. And really, the solution, if you've got too many people that have what you consider like the high-end endgame gear, is that in your next update, you know, content update, or your first expansion pack, whatever you're going to do, you put in a bunch of gear that's way better than that, so that they have to go do it honestly this time. Like, you lost this round. Like, you're done. Like, you have to accept that a whole bunch of people got this gear in a way you didn't intend them to, but, like, you know, welcome to the fucking club.
Get over it and move on, which is what we need to do. All right, let's move on to the last topic of the Big Six. This is where Matt and I try to see the future. We are going to try and predict what we think video games are going to be like in 10 years. So,
which is impossible.
It is impossible, but it's going to be a fun exercise. And so I'm going to start with the game that initially showed me the light. It showed me the future, where we are going to be. And that game is Puzzle Quest. Puzzle Quest was the first game that I played where I was like, why in the hell would there be RPG elements in this game? And I loved it. Mm-hmm. I loved Puzzle Quest because I already loved Match 3 games. Keep in mind, this was like 10, 11 years ago or whenever it came out. I already loved Match 3. That was before people thought of Match 3 as some corny like free-to-play game on their cell phone.
Yeah, this is when it was Bejeweled.
Right. Yeah, or there was even tons of clones back then as well.
Columns.
Yeah. I played this game and I was like, oh my god. Like, they figured out how to put RPG elements into something that I never thought would have RPG elements. And so that was the kind of the eye-opener for me. It was the game that I realized, well, everything's starting to blur together now and becoming like one genre. It's like the population on Earth in a billion years. Everyone's going to be one color. Everyone's going to be intermingled so much that it's just going to be one flat color and everyone is the same hue or whatever. That's where I think video games are going. I think eventually every game is going to have some level of RPG elements in it. And in some ways, it's already kind of here. Like,
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm playing a baseball RPG right now. It's called The Show.
Yep. And
That's what it is.
And there were the games we were just talking about, games like The Division, Destiny, shooters that are now
Even
RPGs.
racing games.
Racing games have RPG elements in them. I mean, I could just go on and on. And then you have like Fallout 4, which is a shooter RPG that weighs more heavily into the RPG side. Then you have like The Witcher 3, which is just more of a straight up RPG, but now instead of being like turn-based like it was back in the old days, it's like full-on action combat. I just think 10 years from now, you will be hard-pressed to find any game that does not have some level or some amount of leveling up, crafting, loot, all of that. It's just, I think that's where it's all headed, with a little dash of survival. Because that seems to be the other element that's just now starting to creep into every game, is some level of survival in it. Even like games that come out without that in it, they put out an update that makes them that way. Like Far Cry Primal is an example. They just put a survival mode in that.
Yep.
They're putting a survival mode in Fallout 4.
And Tomb Raider.
Yep, in Tomb Raider. So that's where they're all going to be survival RPGs in 10 years.
Yep.
So saith Father Shane. What about you, Matt?
Well, I will support the idea of that survival idea being like kind of the next big wave, because my first game to bring up was No Man's Sky, which turns out to have a lot more survival elements to it than we previously thought. I think.
This week, there's a bunch of new demos of it, and you're right. Like, I had no idea it even had that at all. Like, other than, like, it's cold, like, get to a cave or whatever. Like, there's much more to it than that.
There's a lot of resource management. There's a lot of, like, you have to use your resources to refill your weapons, to refill your shields. You have to choose to it's not an auto-regenerating shield.
Yeah.
You have to, like, say, press the options button to, recharge your shields with your equipment. And, like, clearly there's a lot more to that moment-to-moment gameplay. And I think if this game really takes off, you're going to see...
No pun intended.
Right. You're going to see a lot of that sort of infuse into it. And, I mean, I think there are going to be places where you don't, I have a hard time seeing a future in which, like, the new Zelda has survival elements.
Really?
But yeah.
Even in 10 years?
Even in 10 years.
Really? I don't have a problem. I think I have no problem with imagining that. No.
I have no problem imagining. I don't think that they're going to do it.
Why?
Because it's just so anti-Nintendo philosophy. It's like the idea that you'd have to worry about whether Link's hungry. Like, I just don't see them doing it. Because even though I think I would totally play that Zelda game, like, I have a hard time seeing, like, you ever going to see RPG elements in Mario?
Yeah, I think you could.
You could, but they've resisted. I mean, they've made a separate Mario RPG spin-off in the Paper Mario stuff.
Right.
But, like, do you ever think there's going to be a point where you're, like...
You can get higher jumps. And
leveling up your jump, or, like, choosing, putting points in strength to, like, smash blocks as small Mario, or, like...
In 10 years? I think it's possible. I really do. Although I would say Nintendo is... one of the publishers and developers more resistant to change than others.
Yeah. I mean, they seem very dedicated to delivering that, pure Mario experience with everything.
I think if Mario...
I wonder if that's part of the problem.
I think if Mario stays the way it is for another 10 years, Nintendo's in deep crap.
I think the future of Mario is Mario Maker.
Could be.
I think that's what that series is going to be from now on.
With survival elements. You can put food.
They kind of have a survival mode now, where you
Yeah.
just play all the random stages.
Right.
You know,
They do,
I mean, you're, maybe that's the first step towards that. But I think you're right that that survival idea is sort of the new experience points.
I think it brings realism into the game because that's
Yeah.
something that every human can understand.
Well,
It's
also-
like, I'm hungry, I need to eat, or I'm going to die.
One also creates like a connection to the world,
Yeah.
and makes kind of the rampant collecting that has sort of plagued the open world game in the recent years. It gives it a more tangible point, a tangible purpose, beyond just like the Far Cry style of like skin 4,000 animals to make a slightly larger bag.
Right.
So-
Which I did with glee.
Oh yeah, many Bothans died to make this grenade pouch, my friend. So yeah, that would be. I would agree with you on that.
Any other places you see it going?
Survival or just games?
Games. Yeah,
Well, I think VR will be.
VR's on my list as well.
Standard, I think VR will kind of replace what we,
I think always online virtual reality
Yeah.
is the other sort of style that I think is going to permeate games in 10 years. Like every game is going to be connected all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And like the asymmetrical stuff that we're seeing now is just the tip of the iceberg.
I think VR will basically replace the pillar that
Reality?
that we think of as handheld. Like handheld games are going to go away, and VR games will kind of be that third pillar.
Fill in that niche.
now.
I can see that.
Because it's a different way of playing, and a lot of times totally different games. Except it's just you don't really think of the handheld, like what you're playing on your 3DS as being like instead of or on top of what you play on your PlayStation 4 or whatever. It's a different way of playing something, a different platform entirely, and I think that's just how VR is going to end up being thought of.
Well, I think what's going to happen is there's going to be games, because they're always online and they're asymmetrical, there are going to be games that you never leave, ever. So between playing at home on whether it's a TV or whatever the hell the display technology will be in 10 years, who even frickin' knows, or a head-mounted display, HR helmet, or whether then you leave the house with augmented reality glasses on and the game follows you everywhere you go. So basically, Second Life will be real, finally. Where literally the game is a part of every moment of your life.
I keep thinking of a game that never came out. I think it was EA, but it was it first was announced or talked about when we were in college. I think it was called Sovereign.
Yeah, I remember Sovereign.
And it was like kind of a Tom Clancy-ish sort of military strategy game. But the idea was that it was always happening. It was a persistent map, and like you could like play it at home. But if you were out like doing something else, like say one of your neighbors or allies got attacked, they could text you, and like you could like say okay and like commit a certain amount of your forces from your country or whatever to their game and help them that way. And I think a game like that, where like kind of like the Clash of Clans or a game of war or whatever thing, where it's like everyone's competing but it's all asymmetrical kind of thing. I think something that kind of works more real time, like you say with AR. When you're out of the house, and then working in VR when you're there, like I think so, in the sense of like a clan would always be in communication with each other somehow. I think that would definitely be something we start
Or
to
rival
see.
clans. I mean, imagine you're going to see a movie and you have your AR glasses on, and like you're walking into the theater, and like the enemy clan like busts through the wall in AR and like attacks you. Like that's the type of stuff that all this technology is going towards. Like
Good
just
way to get
this,
thrown out of the Alamo Drafthouse, folks.
It's just an all-encompassing way. Like, and it's not just going to be games either. I think movies will work that way. Like, you'll go see a movie and you walk out of the theater with your AR glasses on, and like a creature from the movie will walk through the door or come through the wall or whatever. Like, the possibilities are just endless. But you're seeing the tip of the iceberg here with stuff like The Division, just the MMO, the persistent world. They're building that foundation now to create these worlds that just become a part of your life. It's like it's not even a game anymore. It's just your life, and it's another element of your life that you interact with and combat with or fall in love with or whatever. And I think in 10 years you'll start to see that line dissolve between game in reality, I guess is the best way to put it.
The pop-up ads are going to be nightmares.
Oh, yeah. You're right, though. Think about it.
Like Deadpool 5 is going to be advertised by like Deadpool popping up on your fucking couch.
Oh, you're right.
And being like,
sitting next to you.
Hey, it's opening night. Why aren't you there? I'm like, dude, get out. Like,
you're absolutely right. That's exactly the type of stuff that's going to happen. I mean, it already is happening. Like, if you look at some of the HoloLens stuff that they're doing already, like some of those games where, like, the characters from the game come and hang out with you in your living room and sit down on your freaking couch, that's crazy stuff, man. Like, that is crazy. Or that character from the game sitting next to you saying, hey, the DLC just came out today. I already met the guy from the DLC. He's awesome. Like, you should totally spend the $1 and bring him into the living room because he has some really funny jokes. Like, just think about it, man. Like, everything is about to change, and the tech is there already. Like,
so do you think that, like, AR could lead to a situation where, like, one of the features you could do is, like, the main character of the game is, like, on the couch next to you while you play?
Yeah, giving you tips and tricks, or like
criticizing you.
It could do that. Like, it could do a million things.
I'd play Uncharted 6 with Nathan Drake.
I mean,
sure.
The bow is about to break, is what I'm saying. Like, all this fledgling technology that we have that's now becoming viable and being sold in 10 years. Look at what we're seeing with HoloLens and Magic Leap right now. What we're seeing with Oculus, PlayStation VR, Vive right now. And just imagine 10 years from now.
Well, like you can even think about some stuff we take for granted, and like go back to 2000, let's say. We take it back a few years to when like Dark Souls was beginning. Like, let's say go back to 2000 and tell everyone that, like, oh, there's going to be this huge RPG that's super challenging and like all real time, and the hitboxes are going to be amazing, and people can run into your world and come try to kill you or help you, and you can like fight people off and fight bosses together, and like it's all like that. Like back in like 2000, 2001, that's science fiction.
That's poppycock.
That's crazy. That's just nonsense.
Yeah.
You know,
right.
Like,
it is. Here we are.
And here we are. That's like there's like 7 games that do that now.
Yeah.
You know? And it's like oh, that again. You know? So
I mean, that's a pretty good example, but I do feel like tech has kind of stagnated for a while. I mean, once we got polygonal graphics, you know, it's like I said before, like I was playing Star Siege Tribes with 64 people on a 56K connection for a long time with a Voodoo 2 card. So a lot of the stuff has come along, like, since then, hasn't really iterated that much beyond that. You're right, that asymmetrical multiplayer is one of them. But we've been kind of in this lull for a long time, but the dam is about to burst because of the new technology that we have. And in 10 years, like, honestly, some of the stuff that we're saying right now is probably kind of conservative. Like, there are people way smarter than us who will come up with way better ideas than what we've come up with since we've thought about this topic. Like, people who will get paid metric tons of money to come up with way better ideas. Although, just the stuff that we've come up with, I'm cool with that. That would be awesome, dude. Like, seriously.
I don't know if I want Deadpool following me down the street trying to get me to go to the movies, but like, that's cool the first couple times.
Yeah. But the possibilities are, like, endless. And I'm curious, too. Like, I want to hear what the sifters think. Like, what do you guys think? Are we crazy? You think this stuff is going to happen?
I think it'll all happen. Like,
what do you think is going to happen? I want to see it in the comments.
Like, I think here's the thing I think is going to happen, like one of the VR things that is going to be something that maybe you were not thinking about or not considering early on, but like, I think it's going to become like a thing. I think there's going to be a market, or at least a trend at some point, where you can basically digitize your entire, or like whatever, like you can teach your VR device what your house looks like. And you can wear the helmet, and it can just make your house whatever you want it to be. And I get a lot of that from Transmetropolitan, where the entertainment center is basically holographic.
Right.
And like at one point, like Spider Jerusalem says, "Entertainment center, give me fire," and his whole living room just becomes like an inferno, and he sits in his couch and like lords over the news channels as he rules over the king of hell, basically.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I think that VR is going to let you do stuff like that.
Oh,
like,
yeah,
you're
for
come
sure.
home, sit down in a virtual version of your exact house, but you're going to be able to say, like, make it this. Let me see Hawaii out the window. Like, maybe, just
Will
like,
you ever have to clean your house again?
Hell no. Not until you smell something.
Exactly. Everything looks perfectly clean in VR. It is crazy to think about, though. I mean, you start mixing VR and AR together, and I mean,
at the same time,
you can really mess with people.
What what if like VR then lets you, you have a model of your living room or whatever.
Yeah.
You stick your VR helmet on the kid and say, okay, you're now you're going to play the vacuum game. And it knows where all the dirt is because it has cameras on it. So you just like, okay, vacuum. You get points for all the cleaning you do, and then like you turn those clean points in for time on the machine or something to play a game.
Yeah.
Like there's tons of
possibilities are endless.
The Fitbit is just the beginning of gamifying, boring stuff.
Physical fitness as well. Yeah. I think we came up with some good stuff.
It's exciting.
It is exciting. I'm pumped for it. 10 years from now, man, I'll be pretty old. I hope I'm not too old to appreciate
Here's one of my 10 years from now questions for honestly, like I don't know really have an answer, but I want to know what you think. So let's say Microsoft does move away from the console thing and goes more on kind of a Windows platform idea. So let's say they do that for the next coming years. Let's say that's their plan.
So the Xbox One's their last console.
Yeah, the Xbox becomes more of like a Steam box idea more than an actual individual console platform. What happens to Halo? Do you think Halo will have enough cachet with like the people who are more the PC side? Because since they've ignored the PC with that franchise for years and years, do you think Halo persists?
Yeah, of course. In 10 years, it'll definitely still be around, without a doubt. I mean, that's 3 more entries of the franchise based upon their usual schedule. I think it's close, but I think it has the legs to survive that long. I think it may not survive much longer than 10 years. And I think in 10 years it'll probably be multi-platform, and it'll be if even consoles exist in 10 years, Matt. I mean,
you might just be picking different flavors of PCs by that point.
I mean, we may just be the one console future may be here in 10 years and it's just PC. Like that's really, I mean, we're already kind of there anyway. I mean, what's the difference really between PlayStation 4 and Xbox One? Xbox One,
Sony and Microsoft.
It's just the badge on the machine and the piece of plastic that holds the electronics. That's
I got a PC Station 5.
That's really all it is.
Yeah.
They're just PCs with different pieces of plastic wrapped around them and a different logo slapped on the top of them.
Until we get to the point where the PlayStation 9 shows up, where you just inhale it.
Right? Yeah.
You remember that? Remember that commercial?
Yeah, and it lasts for like 5 years. That one inhale. I definitely inhaled. But yeah, big things are afoot, man. I cannot wait to see the future. I can't wait to see what you guys think the future is going to hold as well. You guys can outdo us, I guarantee it. You can come up with better ideas than what we did.
In fact, I think one of the biggest, one of Microsoft's biggest things in 10 years will be Minecraft.
Still,
Microsoft will be the Minecraft company, basically. In
well,
terms of
kids
software.
will be living in like Minecraft bedrooms and
Yep.
It's crazy.
Virtual reality Minecraft building. You'll be running around on giant Minecraft versions of Mount Doom and the Millennium Falcon and
yeah, it'll keep kids in shape.
Yeah.
That's the problem. I mean, I've even found working on Sifted the last 18 months is like when you sit around in front of a computer all the time, it's not good for you. So
yeah, well, they should do those. I know that you can rig them up, but it's like you have like those bicycles that produce electrical power, and you plug the console into it. If you stop pedaling, the console turns off. But you better keep going until you get to that save point. There's a way to keep the gaming population in shape.
That's for sure. All right, it's time to go to our trailer of the week. It was actually tough this week to choose the trailer of the week because there was a really awesome trailer that came out for Mafia 3. In fact, the best piece of media for the game yet. Really kind of spilled the guts on the story. But I went for a personal choice this week. And a former colleague of mine and friend of mine, Greg Kasavin, his studio, Supergiant Games, developers behind Transistor and Bastion, they announced their brand new game this week. It is called Pyre, and it looks different from their first 2 games. Whereas Transistor and Bastion kind of had that similar vibe to them. This is a whole different genre, whole different thing. So here it is, the debut trailer for Pyre. Make sure you get those questions in while the trailer's rolling. Let's roll it.
When the stars align, the rights shall come to bear, illuminate the signs, the exiles shall be there. All are not the same, but 3 shall be as one.
So, Matt, you just said something that surprised me. You said you were not a fan of Bastion or Transistor.
No, I like the look and I like the concepts. I like everything about them except playing them.
Really?
Basically, I don't know what it is really.
I really liked Bastion. And I love how they do like the narration thing. I wonder if they're going to include that for this game.
I don't know. I like the narration thing a lot. I just felt like it had showed me its hand after an hour or so, and I just didn't.
It's just an action
Yeah.
RPG. Like, I like Bastion, but Transistor, I never actually finished Transistor. I got about halfway through it and I stalled, so...
I don't know. I don't got a bag too hard on Transistor. I got it free from PlayStation Plus, so it's not
There you
like
go.
it's not like I lost anything to it.
Yeah.
It was fine, but it was very clearly by the same people that made Bastion.
Yeah.
And if you love Bastion, that was cool. If you didn't, it didn't really do anything to change my mind. I like the way Pyre looks though. Like
It
it's
looks
a really
crazy.
cool art style.
Yeah, art style is
That like
nuts.
the glass like gem kind of thing on the front of
Yeah.
that book. Like that's a crazy effect. I love that. It looks like
looks
it's
real.
totally real. It looks like you can reach in and grab it.
Yeah,
It's
totally.
Great. It's great.
The art style of that game is nuts. And then it looked like
Yeah.
the overworld was this weird, almost like diorama
Kind of a watercolor
thing.
diorama thing. Yeah, I know.
It's,
They've got really super talented visual artists on
They
at
do.
that company. Like, I don't care what you think about the games one way or the other. It's just like they're making quality stuff. It's not for me, or at least Bastion and Transistor weren't. But like, I got nothing bad to say about them.
and you know what? Like, they were like the first wave of indie.
Yeah,
Like, they
Yeah.
were really on that wave, that first wave that crashed ashore of like, hey, indie games can be like
real
awesome.
games.
Yeah.
And I mean, Greg Kasavin, he was one of our journalist pals
Brethren,
for
yeah.
years and years, and he's been there. And I've only met him a few times, but he's a good dude, and I'm glad his company's doing so well. I mean,
Yeah, both those games sold really well for him, so can't wait to see more of that one. I'm sure we'll see it at E3. Let's see if we have any questions from you guys tonight. It's been a long episode, so we appreciate you guys hanging in there. Let's see. Here we go from, and I can never pronounce his name,
Snowpiercer.
Snowpiercer,
His
that's
name
right.
is Snowpiercer.
Games based on film IPs have had a little bit of a resurgence in the last couple of years. However, not many have reached their full potential. What film franchises do you believe are ripe for a game adaptation and can break the 7 out of 10 Metacritic? On the flip side, what game franchises do you believe will finally break the streak of horrible film adaptations?
Whew. I am surprised that Marvel has not leveraged the Marvel Cinematic Universe more for video games. And I know that they haven't because, kind of the licensed movie game has sort of gone out the window in recent years. And there was an Avengers game that THQ was making, but it just never, the THQ had a lot of problems. And I think your movie license game right now is Lego games, basically. I mean, that's what that's become, or Disney Infinity in case of Star Wars.
At this point, it could go either direction.
Yeah,
The game
yeah.
or the movie or the game.
So I would think that once kind of phase 3 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is in the books, they could probably put together a pretty huge, epic, sprawling game that kind of covered the whole thing and sort of did that up and let you play as all the different characters and do that. I think there's something to that. I don't know if Disney will go for it because they don't seem particularly interested in AAA console and PC development at this point beyond Disney Infinity, which seems to be taking this year off, and Kingdom Hearts, which is at least going to have one more installment.
Right.
Beyond that, I don't know. I mean, there is still some movie games. There's the Fast and the Furious stuff in Forza. Which is
tie-ins
I mean, that's
and
one of the biggest
cross-marketing.
things. And they still make Transformers games for the movies, more or less, which are all terrible, but whatever.
The movies and the games.
Yeah, I mean, Rise of the Dark Spark.
The games
was
weren't
now-
bad, though. The games were better than the films.
Well, the non-movie ones were.
Yeah.
You want good Transformers games, you go to the iMoon's, non-movie ones, or you go to Devastation, the Platinum made last year. But then, the Revenge of the Fallen, Dark of the Moon, and Rise of the Dark Spark were all barely
Yeah.
playable for the most part. I don't know. I think I miss some of the old good movie games that, you remember Wolverine.
Yeah.
Wolverine Origins.
That was actually a good game.
That was a great God of War clone game.
Yeah.
And what happened there was actually the movie was originally going to be an R-rated thing, and they got cold feet and decided to do a bunch of reshoots and got delayed by a year. But the game was already an M-rated action game, set to go with this R-rated movie. And they're like, well, you got to do it. And they're like, no. They wouldn't do
Yeah.
it. But they did end up with another year to polish it. So like that's why that game is so good, is because they had a whole year to basically tinker with it and make it excellent.
Yeah.
So like you don't usually get that kind of luxury. So I don't know if I really want to see the movie game come back too much, but I'm surprised that you haven't seen a little more superhero exploitation so far.
I want to see an Evil Dead game that isn't like tongue in cheek. Like there was Fistful of Boomstick, and it was like slapstick comedy. Like I would like to see an Evil Dead game that's like a survival horror game that's like legitimately scary, and is like the first Evil Dead and the most recent reboot, and not kind of those middle like Army of Darkness type spin-offs. I would also like to see games based on movies that aren't just like action films. So games like movies like Train Spotting and stuff like that. Like movies that are like serious dramas, and have those be games instead of it always being like what Matt was talking about, like a superhero film or some like Mission Impossible, like an action film or a James Bond film or whatever. I feel like a lot of films explore areas that games haven't explored thematically, and that's kind of a good way. It acts as like a Trojan horse to get people to try these new types of games because they're already attached to the films. So, just in a more general sense, that's what I would hope for.
I was interested. It was a long time ago, but they made. You remember James Bond: Everything or Nothing, which was it was a game based on a movie that didn't exist. Basically, Everything or Nothing was like
Mission Impossible for N64 was kind of like that too.
Yeah, but like Everything or Nothing was basically they're like, what if there was this Bond movie?
Yeah,
and we just made a game out of it.
The game was actually pretty good.
It was quite good, and I was like, I always thought that was an interesting idea. Like maybe that was a logical progression of the James Bond idea. Was like just make original games that happen to follow the Bond formula, because the Bond formula lends itself to a video game as well as it does to a movie. Really, I mean, you got an opening action scene, you got a setup, you got another action scene. You know, it all kind of flows, right? And Everything or Nothing worked pretty well. So I would be interested to see, game developers' takes on the James Bond idea, because I'm sure game developers can come up with, Uncharted level crazy, stunt sequences and action sequences that you could maybe never do or not even want to attempt in the movies.
Yeah,
I would be behind that. I'm more of an action-y person, I guess, on this one. I don't know. Telltale Games presents Train Spotting is also something I would play. But
all right, let's see. This one is from This Is For Vidya Games. I might have missed a talk, but any thoughts on Star Fox Guard? Yeah, I've played a ton of Star Fox Guard. It's not very good. That's what I would say. You can tell it's like Nintendo's first try at tower defense, or Miyamoto's first try at tower defense. I've seen some people say that it's good for couch co-op, but it honestly drove me bonkers with my wife telling me, camera 9, camera 6. Like,
I do like the enemy that's like, it's just like a TV screen, and it jumps up in front of a camera and like puts like a false video in front of it. That's a pretty cool thing.
It's unique, I'll say that much, but it's not that fun to play, I guess is the best way to put it. Like, your eyes are just going in circles, looking at the cameras, looking for enemies, and then you just tap it really quickly on the gamepad, and then that camera goes up, and then you have, like, these weird inverted controls, like shooter controls for each turret. What I found is that, like, a lot of it was just luck, whether you completed the levels, and at the end, all you really had to do was just switch to the camera closest to, like, your Nexus, and just shoot them as they walked in, because it only takes like a couple shots to knock most enemies down. So I've seen a couple reviews that really gave it high scores. I've seen a couple that gave it really bad scores. I tend to agree with the people who gave it bad scores. I did not really have much fun with it. It does kind of put you on edge. It makes you kind of nervous while you play it. If you're into that kind of game, you might like it more than I did. I just feel like games like that just kind of toy with your emotions, and so I'm not a big fan of them. As a bonus for Star Fox,
it's okay. Put you on guard.
Yeah. Like, I would pay $5 for Star Fox Guard. It's something fun to fill around with.
Keep in mind for your mobile side there in Nintendo.
It's also very samey, I guess is a good way to put it. Like, you do level up your units, but they're not as varied as, like, most tower defense games. Like, it just, like, buffs, like, the turret. Like, now the turret fires like a machine gun instead of being single shot. It's not like a lot of tower defense games where you have these units that do entirely different things and have entirely kind of different functionality. So, and look, I'm a big tower defense guy. I probably should have said that before I started talking about it. I love tower defense. I've played, I can't tell you how many tower defense games. Like, I think they're a great way to suck away time on flights, and so that's where I play them a lot of times. But So I feel like I'm pretty qualified to judge Star Fox Guard, and I'm not a big fan. So
Vinaraba asks me if I've heard anything about the reception from the Assassin's Creed trailer from CinemaCon. I have not. Any thoughts on its chances of success? Assassin's Creed is going to get buried because it comes out a week after Rogue One. And that's that. Like, it looks pretty good, and Fassbender, I guess, is signed on to a potential sequel, but I don't think it's going to do particularly well, because I think it's going to be rolled over by Star Wars. Although I think it might do better than Warcraft will.
a couple questions about Sifted that I'll try to answer quickly. This is from M. Griley. Shane, what are your plans to grow Sifted? Marketing. A ton of marketing. We're working on a big trailer right now. We're going to do a big push on Facebook with the trailer. In the past, we've been doing Facebook ads that are just still images, basically, with text. But our new one is going to be like a 1 minute sizzle reel that goes out with the ad. So we want to switch up our tactics a little bit. Our conversion rate's pretty good once we get people to the site as far as the number of people that come to the number of people that subscribe. That number is higher than typical for marketing, but we just need to get more people to the site, period, so that they have the opportunity to sign up. So that answers that. Cheater Hater, I like that name. With the influx of cash from the awesome Sifted Elite members, what does that mean for Sifted as the anniversary approaches? Well, it seemed like there's a lot of people who donated, and there are, but when you get down to the raw numbers of money, I don't know what I'd call it, like an influx of cash. I mean, you could just count the number of people that we mentioned the last couple episodes and just multiply that by 50 to know pretty much how much money we've got from the program. And it's nice. It gave us like a nice little buffer or whatever in our bank account. But it's not the kind of money that's going to like change everything, I guess is the best way to put it. It's not enough money to like hire somebody or even really launch a new show. Like what they're getting at Easy Allies, like $30,000 a month, like that would definitely change like everything. But I mean, if you really do the math, we've got like $4,000 or something like that. So that may sound like a lot of money, but in the grand scheme of things, when you're running a company, $4,000 goes like that. So again, I really appreciate it. But if you're expecting like the world to turn upside down from Sifted Elite, that's just unfortunately not the case. Unless things were to explode and it were to go to crazy. But, you know, I think we've kind of figured out where the curve is with that at this point. So, do you have one, Matt?
It was Vox91 asked, could you ever see high-profile independent studios organizing in a way similar to how AAA developers were, only with far better management within the next 10 years, maybe as a way to pursue grander ideas?
Like a collective.
An
indie
kind of
collective.
coalition sort of thing.
Would that be like them coming together to work together on a game?
On a bigger game, I think is what he's saying.
No. I think the logistics of it are just too insane. And figuring out who makes what and splitting up the pie and just bringing all those teams together to work
and
on
all those
one
egos.
game. Oh, man, it would be so hard. Like, the logistics of it.
Like, basically, you're talking about like an indie supergroup.
Yeah.
Which is...
I love the idea of it.
Yeah,
Don't get me
it'd be
wrong.
cool.
Like, I love where you're heading and, like, you're thinking, like, yeah, let's get all these awesome guys together and, like, Voltron them together into this awesome studio. I love the concept of it, but I really don't see it ever happening. Matt says egos, but I just think the actual process of bringing all these different teams who have worked together into one team and trying to create one workflow that everybody can handle and be proficient with and efficient with, you'd spend so much time trying to get everything up and running that if you just started building the game on your own, you'd have it like a third of the way done at that amount of time. So I don't see it happening. What do you think, Matt?
Probably not. I mean, it's a nice idea, but in terms of getting all, it might be something that could happen in terms of like kind of joining together to form sort of a brain trust idea. But in terms of like all developing one product, I don't think that's feasible. As much as awesome as the end result might be in a perfect world.
Let's see. Maybe one more. Any word on updated Sifted subscription costs from Mike Zek? Nope. But you're going to find out soon because, believe it or not, Matt, we are a month away from the 1 year anniversary of Sifted.
Coming up.
Yeah, I mean, some people, it depends, because some people got in the really early beta, and then we had, like, the open beta. And so some people's, like, turn over at, like, May 16th, some people's are, like, May 29th or whatever, but in a roundabout way, we're about a month away from the 1-year anniversary, and you will know about the subscription cost probably in 2 weeks, because I want to, like, have people have the ability, one, for so we can message it, but two, so people can prepare if they're willing to resubscribe at the new cost or not. So, yeah, within 2 weeks you should have that. I kind of have an idea of the number right now, but I feel like the more time I can spend thinking about it and analyzing it, the better. And so I still have a little buffer time to do that. So I'm gonna make the most of it. So.
Netflix wants to know if there's a chance for a watch later or read later function on Sifted.
That is one of the most requested features on Sifted. And so as far as new features are concerned, that is at the top of the list. There's still a bunch of stuff that needs to be done, to be honest. Like, our achievements still aren't implemented. Our private crew forums still aren't implemented. I think one of the big problems is you guys come up with really good ideas, and we're like, oh yeah, that's a really good idea. And then we decide to implement that, and it just keeps pushing, like, all the other stuff back. So at a certain point, we have to kind of call it and kind of finish the last couple big bullet points for the website and get those done. But what you just mentioned is one of the most requested features on the site. Another thing I should add, too, no one's asked it, but we've had a ton of requests for it, is the ability to ignore users. That is not... We're not going to implement that on Sifted. We're going to rely on our moderators to keep undesirables off the site. Because I just feel like the whole concept and the whole vibe that we're trying to create with Sifted, allowing people to ignore others, just goes against the grain of everything I wanted to create with the site. Like, I want it to be a place where people are happy to interact with each other. And so just trust us that we are on it and our mods are on it, and we're going to fetter out people who are ruining the community and get rid of them. And I think we've been pretty good about that. And look, we're not jerks either. We give people more than a fair chance. But at a certain point, you just kind of figure out it's not working out, and we both need to move on, or whatever relationship cliche you want to use, and just kind of part ways. But yeah, we're not going to give you the ability to block other users. It just goes against the Sifted aesthetic, and I just don't want to implement it. So.
And Solo Dolo 241 wants to know, what E3 presser are you most looking forward to?
Oh, Nintendo. Without a doubt.
Assuming it's a presser and not a direct.
Even if it's just a direct, yeah. I mean, they have the new hardware, so.
Yeah. If not Nintendo, I would say Sony, just because, maybe Microsoft, because I have no idea what they're going to do.
Corner. Like, yeah. I mean, it's Nintendo, hands down. I mean, they have the new product to show.
Yeah.
I mean, best case scenario, Sony shows the Neo, which, it'll have a different form factor probably from PlayStation 4. But at the end of the day, it's still the same functionality at a higher resolution. But Nintendo, like, is a complete wild card. We have no idea, like, what NX is or what it looks like, or... Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for me, it's Nintendo.
We don't even know anything about Zelda.
Yeah.
They have to show Zelda, right?
Yeah, at the very least, we're going to get to see a big chunk of Zelda, I think. Kind of has to be at this point. So, all right, we have to cut it off there. Before we go, though, we do want to announce our brand new Sifted Elite members for this week. And there's two. One is Short Raver, and one is Glottis. Congratulations, and thank you so much. Thanks, gentlemen. Appreciate the donation. Short Raver in particular, he plugged away until he got to Elite. He put a little bit in here, a little bit in there, and he finally got himself up to the $50. So congratulations.
In the green.
That's right. You are in the green now. So, yeah, as you can see, like someone was saying earlier about the Elite program, well, you can see how much it slowed down. Like the first week, it was just like rungs of people. Last week, it was like 10. This week, it's like 2. So, yeah. If it had stayed at where it was in the first week, every week, then yeah, we're talking about like game-changing stuff for Sifted, but it's kind of worked out the way I thought. Better than I thought. Like, I didn't think the first rush would be anywhere that big, but as far as like the tail off, yeah, it's kind of where I expected it to be. So I think that's it for this week's show. We did
We did get
We
3
just
hours.
well, we didn't actually because we started a little late,
Little late.
but we almost hit 3 hours again in a show I never really dreamed that we would. So, as Matt said, we like to hear ourselves talk, and hopefully you guys like to hear us talk too. So, everybody have an awesome week. We'll be back again. We're back on this Wednesday train now, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Next week we'll have a full 7 days to pull stories from. This week we were a little bit short shrifted, but I think we made the best of what we had. So. Everybody have an awesome evening. Thanks to everybody in Europe who stuck around this. Actually, thanks to everyone who stuck around the stream, but especially the people in Europe. It is late there. Hopefully,
It's early there. It's
well,
like
early now.
sunrise
Yeah, it's like sunrise. So have a cup of Joe, and yeah, hopefully you make it through the day okay. Thanks, everyone. Everyone have a great week. Game Face is up and out.